10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On this Monday morning, are we closer to the breakup of the United Kingdom? That is the Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Monday, the 9th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis will meet Stormont party leaders today in a bid to restore power sharing, calling it a significant moment for Northern Ireland.
He'll also hold talks with Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney to discuss last week's shock result.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pulled out of a keynote speech amid growing questions about whether he broke COVID rules.
The event at the Institute for Government think tank was due to discuss the challenges the country faces.
Vladimir Putin is mirroring the fascism of the Nazis, the Defence Secretary claims today ahead of the Kremlin's annual Victory Day parade.
In a major speech, Ben Wallace will also directly criticise Russia's military commanders for their complicity in war crimes.
OK, good morning. Lovely to have you on board, on the radio, on television, on YouTube, all around the country and indeed all around the planet. Lots to talk about. We want your views. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Or you can tweet us at GB News. Get in touch. We are the People's Channel.
So to our top story today, and that is the State of the Union. The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis will hold talks today with the 5 major Stormont parties.
He conceded that the historic victory, which saw Sinn Féin become the largest party in Assembly, was a significant moment for Northern Ireland. However, he made clear that his hope was still to form an executive as soon as possible.
He's also expected to meet with the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney today, who's warned that restoring the executive in Northern Ireland could actually take months. Well, let's go to political commentator Eamonn Malley now, who joins us from Belfast. Eamonn, what has just happened? Different reaction from different people. Some people be very welcoming of the state of the parties at the Northern Ireland Assembly, and other people quite frightened.
Yes, let me put this in context very simply, Eamonn. It means one thing, and I think there should be a cause for celebration here. What happened at the weekend with Sinn Féin becoming the biggest party in terms of representatives at Stormont? It means that the era of militant republicanism, as we knew it in terms of the IRA historically, is over, gone, kaput, and finito. Now, that is very, very significant. It means that politics, in terms of republicanism, has won through. After that, questions arise. What does it really mean? Does it mean now that Sinn Féin holding the post of First Minister will automatically lead to a border poll to decide whether Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom or the Republic of Ireland? It doesn't automatically mean that. Does it mean that a united Ireland is just down the road? It doesn't mean that either. But symbolically, a Republican, for the first time in 101 years, holding the post of First Minister is immensely important, symbolically.
You know, we hear lots of talk, and as I said, this means different things to different people here. And all the applause there for Michelle O'Neill, who, to explain to people again, becomes very, very complicated. She should be First Minister, but that, again, is not guaranteed because of the way the setup is in Northern Ireland. Explain that to people as well.
Yes. The significance of Michelle O'Neill, a Republican holding the post, cannot be underestimated. But the posts of First Minister and Deputy First Minister are co-equal in our system in Northern Ireland. And you cannot have an administration without the support of both the First and Deputy First Minister. That's just a reality. It's like having two Prime Ministers. But the symbolism of holding the post of First Minister, being the party with the biggest number of representatives, that's what's really militating against unionism and making them very angry at this point in time. But you cannot have one without the other. So Jeffrey Donaldson says, because there has been no resolution to the so-called Irish border, the border in the Irish Sea, the Northern Ireland Protocol, he will not give his permission to form a government at this point in time unless Boris Johnson makes concessions on the whole issue of the protocol, the Northern Ireland Protocol, and scraps the Irish Sea border. That's basically what's going to hold up proceedings in terms of an administration kicking in immediately, unless Jeffrey Donaldson does an absolute U-turn in the next 24 hours, next 3-4 weeks.
I suppose the problem with all of that then, Eamonn, is that if Boris Johnson is to rip up the protocol, as some people are suggesting they're considering, that has implications not only in, I suppose, the EU's retaliation, but also in the UK relationship with the Biden administration, who've really strongly warned against that. So what you see is this kind of impasse on all fronts, possibly.
You're quite right. And the other thing is this, and this cannot be ignored, the majority of people in Northern Ireland opposed Brexit. The Alliance Party, who did extremely well, who's now sitting with 17 seats, that might be called the middle party in Northern Ireland. They jumped from 8 seats to 17 seats in this election. The Alliance Party were anti-Brexit. Sinn Féin was anti-Brexit. The Social Democratic and Labour Party was anti-Brexit, John Hume's former party. So the majority of people in Northern Ireland opposed Brexit. So Brandon Lewis and Boris Johnson have got a big problem. And they may act unilaterally, but the damage that they might do to the British government in terms of trade agreements with Europe could be immense. There could be a very considerable fallout from that. So I think that the British government, the bright boys in the British government, would be very reticent to act unilaterally or arbitrarily to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol, given that it's an international agreement and given that international agreements are normally binding.
But if that was the case, Eamonn, then that leaves us without a government yet again in Northern Ireland. And people, I don't know what your analysis is, when they went to the polls last Thursday, were they voting on the cost of living crisis? Were they voting on the terrible state of the NHS in Northern Ireland? What is going to happen to everyday life?
Right, let me explain this, Eamonn. The bottom line is that Sinn Féin stayed away from a united Ireland, stayed away from border polls, spoke about the needs of people. Today, Michelle O'Neill's big thing was the problems facing people, the cost of fuel, the state of the health situation here, all of those things. The Alliance, they majored on these, and those parties have been rewarded. They've been rewarded big time. They didn't get involved in the protocol. They didn't get the Northern Ireland Protocol, Irish Sea borders, border polls and all that. And the people rewarded them. So I think that's a measure of how people are thinking and acting in Northern Ireland. And the other thing, Eamonn, I should point out, young professional people from both the Catholic and nationalist people, Protestant community, they are now voting for the so-called perceived moderate alliance party. The jump in the alliance support is extraordinary, to go from 8 seats to 17 seats in a single election. Unthinkable, but it has happened.
And, a big shift that, people are less likely to think of themselves in religious terms as Catholic or Protestant, and more about whether they're unionist or nationalist on this sort of thing. Eamonn, so much to talk about. What we're doing is we're going to get people's reaction to what they think is going on, what they fear, what they aspire to. And we'll do that throughout the programme then, my friend, and we'll speak to you again after 8 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. Eamonn Malley, their political commentator, live from Belfast. Because the sign's not up. What is the email address?
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well done. Or you can tweet. I get that one at GB News. You can do that with us with your views on all of this. The time approaching 6:10.
Yeah, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is today to use a speech to accuse Russia's President Vladimir Putin of mirroring the fascism of the Nazis as the Kremlin holds its annual Victory Day parade.
Well, he'll also criticise the Russian army for their complicity in war crimes in Ukraine.
So for more on this, let's speak to military historian and defence analyst Chris Newton, who joins us in the studio. Very good morning to you, Chris. Look, here in the UK, we celebrated VE Day yesterday, and there's the same sort of commemoration taking place in Russia a day later. Just explain, first of all, what that's all about, and then we can talk about how President Putin is kind of hijacking the celebrations for something a bit more sinister.
Yes, good morning and thanks for having me. Yeah, the difference in the day is all to do with the surrender and when that was signed. So the final surrender was signed at around about 11 o'clock on the 8th of May, Berlin time, but it was 1 o'clock on the 9th of May, Moscow time. So that's why in the West it's the 8th of May. In Russia is the 9th of May. OK, and equally poignant for both, nations or continents, whatever you want to describe it as. I mean, yesterday, lots of people, paying tribute to those who lost their lives, and they've done the same in Russia for generations because they had a huge death toll, 27 million, I think. Soviets lost their lives in that awful struggle against the Nazis. Not all of them soldiers, huge number of civilians as well. But today, President Putin expected to use this national sort of sacred day to talk about his own special operations. Tell us what you expect will be different this year from previous Victory Day parades. Well, I mean, first of all, we expect to have less personnel and less equipment in the actual parade because obviously they're off to war. But clearly, Putin will put the emphasis on the war that he's fighting at the moment, and he's going to make the connections between World War II and this war, and he's going to make all kinds of ridiculous accusations like calling the Ukrainians Nazis and things like that. So there's obviously going to be a much more emphasis on this war and drawing the connections. Interesting that both sides seem to be referring to the Nazis or fascism as the common enemy. How helpful or unhelpful is that? I mean, we're hearing that today our Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, will use that analogy in a key speech today. Very different enemies, though, weren't they, the Nazis, from President Putin? And the same, President Putin's reference to the Nazis, very different from his neighbours, Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, there are clear similarities in terms of the expansionist aims, Putin's use of ethnic grievances to justify wars and invasions. There's increasing social Darwinistic rhetoric, I think. Well, but to be clear, that's coming from Putin rather than from the West or from NATO, as he claims. But yet he's the one making the suggestion that the enemy have Nazi elements, which is complete nonsense. Oh yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the 2019 elections in Ukraine, the far right was absolutely nowhere. So, and Ukraine's democracy, yes, it's got problems, but it's a democracy, and yeah, these accusations are ridiculous.
And look, as a historian, military historian, you'll have followed, the role of propaganda closely, and it's been very alarming to see how it's been used in Putin's war. I was hearing over the weekend the number of Russian casualties in this invasion of Ukraine is roughly believed to be about the same as the number of Russian deaths over the 10-year period in Afghanistan, already really high, given it's only been just over 2 months. How is that going down with the Russian population, with the mothers of soldiers, and how key is propaganda in all of that?
I mean, it's very difficult to say because you have all of these draconian laws. You can't call the war. It's a special military operation. You've got all of this propaganda, which we've discussed. And so in that sense, if you look at the polls, and again the polls, how much credibility can you give them? They still indicate widespread support for the war. Whether there's any unrest, we don't know because they're being arrested and it's not being reported. So at the moment, the indications are, still lots of support for the war, but we'll have to see as this war drags on whether that's, that level of support sustains itself.
I just wanted to ask you finally, just because I saw lots of the pictures yesterday of preparations being made for the victory parade today with this now notorious Z emblem, and they're using this black and orange colouring on that Z, and obviously lots of overtones for us in the West. We look at that and we see sort of, reminds us of the swastika, doesn't it? But pictures of children from kindergarten driving in toy tanks with the letter Z emblazoned. How important are symbols like that, looking back historically at these sorts of things?
Oh, I mean, they're extremely important. There's all part of the militaristic propaganda which Putin has been using, and it was Putin that really kind of revived the Victory Day celebrations and the parades. And they're symbols, and they're designed to galvanise the population. And yes, and they've been used throughout history as well. And we saw it in the Nazi times as well. It's they're very important, combined with everything that's being pumped out in Russian state TV. And we're seeing clips of all of that on the internet. It's constant in terms of
I
Russia.
think we're going to see a lot of that orange and black Z today. Chris Newton, military historian, really good to talk to you. Thanks for coming in this morning.
16 minutes past 6, a very good morning to you. And let's bring you up to date news-wise. Here are the headlines. Ukraine's president says around 60 people who had been hiding from shelling in a school in Luhansk have been killed by Russian bombs. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has called the deliberate targeting of civilians a war crime.
The government has announced £128 million in funding towards the arts in England. The money will go towards improving places of culture like libraries, galleries and museums, and to keep them safe for the future.
The actor Dennis Waterman has died at the age of 74 and was recognised at last night's BAFTA ceremony. He was best known for his starring role as bodyguard Terry McCann in Minder, and he first found fame as the sidekick to Inspector Regan in The Sweeney. His family says he passed away peacefully in hospital in Spain with his wife by his side.
Now, the sun's been shining all weekend. Were you out in your garden at all?
No.
No. Oh, well, that's a shame.
No, I was out and about. No, I was out and about doing
Yeah.
various things, and but you're right. So we're leading on to a survey that talks about what annoys people about their neighbours, and I do think noise is a big issue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, apparently this new survey says that hot tubs and fire pits are a real gripe for neighbours now, and I suppose it just means people are socialising out in the garden, and that often involves drinking and noise.
Yeah.
And noise. So let us know if that annoys you. I have to say, I'm really lucky with my neighbours. I think we're probably the noisiest on our little terrace because we've got screaming children.
Yeah.
And when the paddling pool comes out in the summer...
Yes, children are always
splashing.
a great annoyance.
Yes, when you don't have
the
them.
decibels.
But we're always delighted if we have neighbours with kids, because we're all in it together. Yeah, maybe smoking. I used to live in a house where our neighbours smoked in the garden, and that was horrible.
That's outside.
Well, no, but on a small terrace, and if you had your doors and windows open, the children's rooms would fill.
There must have been some smokers. There must have been with that. Conifer trees annoy me.
I love a conifer.
No, but not if your neighbour doesn't decide, if they grow them really high and they grow into your garden.
Block the sunlight.
And they block the sunlight and they get big and bushy and they don't take any responsibility for paying the cost of either sharing the cost, not that I think you should be sharing the cost because it grows into your garden, but even just paying for them. You know, people that just don't do the right thing.
Yeah.
They just don't do the decent thing, the proper thing.
Yeah, you're so right, actually, about trees. My parents have a lovely view across the valley, and now the garden down the hill stopped chopping their trees. It's blocking the view, and my mum dreams about climbing that fence.
Yes.
Having a go at that
sorting that one out. So, I mean, we're just highlighting a few things there. Luckily, I've got delightful neighbours. I haven't got any problems.
Yes, me too.
But it can ruin your life. I mean, if you have bad neighbours, it can really, really ruin your life.
Well, that's why they do documentaries about it, isn't it? Neighbours from hell.
Neighbours from hell. Let us know if that is the case with you. OK, so get in touch with us. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews.
Now, in other news this morning, tackling obesity is, of course, one of the greatest long-term health challenges currently faced in England.
Well, currently faced everywhere, actually.
Well, that's true, yeah.
As new data highlights, the biggest increase in childhood obesity levels recorded to date, with those from deprived backgrounds impacted most.
Well, in a bid to tackle the issue, a teenager from Grimsby's launched a nationwide fitness scheme in primary schools across the country, and our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has the story.
With childhood obesity figures at an all-time high, teenager Bailey Greetham-Clark is on a mission to combat the overweight epidemic amongst 4 to 11-year-olds. Through his business, Be Great Fitness, Bailey has just launched a nationwide scheme called Get Up and Move, an online platform for primary schools providing workout videos and challenges for children.
It's actually incredibly shocking, the amount of childhood obesity we've got in primary schools. I've been speaking to a few head teachers around the UK, and they can firsthand see the effects of childhood obesity within their schools. They can actually see the rise. So it really is something truly worrying at the moment, which is why we're running projects like these to try and help tackle that. We're offering both online platforms and in-person platforms to help tackle childhood obesity. We're doing what other people are not. We're pioneering this, and as a 19-year-old person in the UK, I'm really taking this on myself because I've seen it firsthand, and I've thought, you know what, somebody needs to do something about this. So we're really pushing and driving and hoping we can get more schools on board and more schools integrated into this.
Sinead Fallon is head of PE at Goxhill Primary School in Barrow-upon-Humber, where children have been attending Bailey's after-school fitness sessions, and she's seen the benefit of them firsthand.
I can't find the words to say how much it improves the children's behaviour, their academic studies, and it just has that general upbeat feeling. When you go out and you see the children enjoying themselves in a physical activity or PE lesson, they're all engaged, they all want to be there most of the time, and it's just a way of bringing those children in that maybe can't access some academic opportunities. It really lets them have the ability to shine and has just so many benefits. It's really lovely.
And this is what pupils at Goxhill Primary School have to say about the fitness classes.
I like the skipping we do here.
I like coming.
It keeps you fit and healthy. I like doing boxing, like doing the hot potato.
How does it make you feel afterwards?
Sweaty. Very sweaty.
With the government calling childhood obesity one of the biggest health challenges this country faces, Bailey hopes his national fitness project for primary schools will go some way to curbing the crisis. Anna Riley, GB News, Barrow-upon-Humber.
Thank you, Anna. That boy packs a punch there, and that's the thing to do. Exercise, exercise, exercise.
It's an emotive issue because all parents want to do the best by their children. And, you know, if some kids are overweight, it's probably through love that they've got there, you know, their parents giving them treats and things. And as we've discussed on this programme so many times before, it is too easy to give the wrong things. All the chocolate and all the stuff, they're always the ones that are on discount, they're always the ones that are by the till. It's so easy to spoil your kids, literally.
Yeah. Or indeed your partner. I mean, my wife's a feeder, right? So
lovely.
She's a chubby chaser, right? So basically what she does is to keep other women disinterested in me.
I do think that's a good tactic.
She
fatten up your
builds me-
fella so that no one else wants him.
It's fatten up your fella week.
I'm all for that.
That's what it is. But yeah, that's often what people do to keep their partners out of touch of others, right? So there we go.
I'm sure that doesn't keep them off you, Eamonn. Anyway.
If only. Listen, it's the start of Mental Health Awareness Week today, and we're going to be discussing how we can talk more openly about mental health, because there's a report today saying doctors feel they're not qualified. GPs, they're not qualified. That now is 40% of their workload to give guidance on mental health, and most of them say they're not trained for it, OK? So we've got Liz Kershaw, we've got Christopher Biggins. They'll be talking about that and lots more on the papers.
Yeah, and before that, we've got the forecast. And it's going to be good.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens. Moving into northern England, and it will also be dry there, but the cloud will be in on the increase, especially in the west. Winds will also be strengthening here, especially over the Pennines. Up into Scotland, and it's a very different story here, with a band of wet and windy weather moving across the country. Feeling much cooler here too, much more than yesterday. The wet weather will also be affecting Northern Ireland this lunchtime, with the raining turning heavy at times. Combined with strengthening winds, it will also be feeling pretty miserable here. The rain will be slowly tracking back south-eastwards throughout the rest of Monday, although much of the south is staying dry until after dark. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, still to come on today's programme, we are live and on your doorstep in Ripley in Derbyshire just before 7 to get your take on the big stories of the day.
So it's Ripley in Derbyshire.
Not Ripley in Surrey.
Correct.
Which is also lovely.
Which we know people in Ripley and Surrey.
That's where I went to school.
Did it? Was it?
Yeah, went to Ripley Court School for
There
many
you go.
years, yeah.
Oh, lot to answer for. Also coming up, how dangerous is your holiday air conditioning, right? I have to admit, air conditioning is very important to me.
Not to me, I turn it off straight away. Oh, not in a hot
Would you turn it off?
Well, I do hate it. I hate it.
But even if you're...
If I could, I would. I would always have a fan.
Spain or whatever,
I'd have a fan. But it's a marital debate.
Yeah, but anyway, is it healthy? What germs is it spewing out? How well maintained is the air conditioning in any hotel you stay in? We have the travel guru Simon Calder live at 7:15 for his tips on keeping yourself safe as regards and be aware of air conditioning. So just make sure, as always, you get in touch on any of the subjects we're talking about this morning. Lots of you already getting in touch about noisy neighbours and the like. The email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News. Yeah, just want to do the Northern Ireland situation because that was a big story for us. Darren, I'm scared for the unity of the United Kingdom after the Assembly results in Northern Ireland. And we all know Sinn Féin's endgame. None of us should be fooled. Well, I don't think they're trying to fool. They're pretty straightforward about Irish unity on that one. Martin, I think that this shows the lack of investment or care into Northern Ireland's infrastructure. The people have a right to be angry, and if they want to go, meaning leaving the United Kingdom, they should be allowed to vote on it, OK? So keep those views coming in. Now, a really important week in the calendar. It is Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and according to new research, 60% of people struggling with their mental health do not tell anyone about it. OK, well, let's talk about this now and the stigmas around mental health. Psychiatrist Dr Andres Fonseca joins us now. Doctor, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
What is mental health? Because, not to demean it in any way, but honestly, if you went back 5 years, you went back 7, 8, 9, 10 years, hardly anybody talked about it. Now we're all talking about it. Do we know what to do with it? Are we resourced enough to deal with it?
Well, I mean, mental health is health, it's part of health. And I trained as a doctor initially. I was a GP for quite a few years, couple of years. And actually one of the things that I saw in my practice is that a large chunk of the people that were coming to see me had mental health problems, and that's what sort of started my interest. What is a mental health problem? Well, it could present itself in many different ways. For example, you may have depression is a common presentation of anxiety. So, depression characterized by low mood, poor energy, demotivation, and sometimes you have thoughts about harming yourself, and that can be quite dangerous. In anxiety, you tend to be worried about certain situations. It could be everything around you that could be overwhelming for you. And it results in avoiding situations, and it results in an inability to sort of do the things that you normally want to do. So it's
when you talk about physical health, people talk about the worried well and those sort of time wasters that come in and use up doctors' time. Is that also the case in mental health? Are you seeing sort of proliferation of people with very minor mental health problems who perhaps are feeling sad about something and attribute the label? And this isn't to diminish the issue at all of mental health, but I wonder if in it becoming more talked about and us being more aware of it, we're also absorbing at the bottom a sort of drag of people sort of using it, latching onto it a little bit.
I don't know. I think, as you said at the beginning, is there's a huge percentage of people that do experience quite serious problems that actually don't tell anybody about it. So, if anything, you might think is the opposite. That we're really struggling to see it. And for example, if you look at what the World Health Organization says about how many days are lost from work.
See, 16% of all days lost are due to mental health problems.
That's right.
But this is where we come into this whole complex problem of understanding what it is, how it manifests itself, and a lot of people don't have sympathy for it because, if I say to you I have a sore throat, you can say open up and look at a torch and you can see that my throat's sore or whatever. But if I say to you, oh, it's my mental health doctor, I mean, it's harder to prove there's something wrong with you, isn't it?
That's right, and actually that's probably one of the things that prevents people from actually seeking help. You know, it's like, I can't demonstrate it to you, I can't do something about it, I can't show you something to prove it. So in that sort of, because you're having these problems, so it's going to affect your self-esteem, it's going to affect your confidence in yourself. So, you know, because those are the symptoms of the condition, that you're going to actually struggle to believe in yourself, to actually tell the doctor about these things. And
can we see a report today where some huge amount of 40% of doctors say, look, we're not qualified, GPs, we're not qualified to deal with this, and this has landed on our doorstep. We've got 15 minutes to see a patient, and then we're finding out there's a mental health problem here as well. Is there anything, as we start this week, that we can all do for ourselves to protect ourselves?
I think it's important to actually, first of all, notice it. And if you do notice that you're having symptoms, that you do actually seek help. And I know what you're saying about GPs. There's a lot of GPs that are quite well prepared, but the problem is actually that there's a lot of pressure on them from all sorts of places. And actually, we've been just through a pandemic. It's been really difficult on them. And actually, the pandemic has affected us physically, but it also has affected our mental health. And that's increased those problems. So it's about sort of, you know, realizing that you do have a problem and actually seeking help. And that's why it's sort of we've started this campaign about I Get Help, to try and get people to sort of recognise this.
I just want to draw attention to the fact that it is men who particularly are not coming forward and are the highest risk, aren't they, category particularly of suicides, and the sort of worst target age for that, 40 to 60-year-olds?
Yes. So it's middle-aged men in particular that are most at risk, you know, disproportionately at risk, and actually is one of the main causes of death for men, and you know, in that age, you know, unfortunately. So it's as serious as that. So you might say we struggle to recognise it, but it's actually a big killer.
Yeah.
Well, look that up. I Get Help campaign that the doctor was referring to there. Dr. Fonseca, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
The start of Mental Health Awareness Week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And of course, the key in all of this is always not to struggle in silence. Do seek out help. And you can always email us as well. We can always direct you to help as well. Do that by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, you know, and what the doctor was referring to there, and he talks about anxiety. And we know doing news, the pandemic brought out huge anxiety with people. The war in Ukraine has brought out huge anxiety with people as well. And then people have to face the cost of living crisis going on now as well.
Possible recession.
There is a lot to worry about. There's a lot to drag you down. So you're not alone. And remember that campaign, I Get Help, encouraging people to talk openly about their mental health.
Coming up, we're going to be taking a look through the papers today with Christopher Biggins and Liz Kershaw, enough to put a smile on anyone's face. See you in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Here we are on this Monday morning, going through the newspapers with Liz Kershaw and Christopher Biggins. Very nice to see both of you.
And you.
Morning.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, you want to start with the...
You always call her Elizabeth. Can I just start by saying?
It's my family Sunday name.
It's just Sunday.
It's an honour to be
Very
given.
formal.
Yeah.
Should hear
Better than Betty.
Should hear what most people call her. So we go front page of the Times. They're talking about a Brexit reboot. Tell us more.
Well, a lot of things were promised, weren't they, before the Brexit referendum, and expectations have been dashed somewhat because any reforms the government intended after we left the EU were immediately, the kibosh was put on them by the pandemic. And the
war in Ukraine.
And the war. And then the election last Thursday, it says, has been a wake-up call to the Conservatives, who are at the moment the ruling party in government, to analyse why the so-called Blue Belt, so the Shire counties, prosperous southern towns, betrayed them and went to the Liberal Democrats. And among the big issues is planning, which I can relate to because I do live in a rural area. So, you know, I'm a NIMBY.
Yeah.
I do want affordable housing for people, but not in the field behind my house. So that when the government, and through our local MP, she didn't do anything to try and represent our views, impose plans on you, you think, well, maybe I won't vote for them then.
Yeah.
So that's
I do
one
want
of
to
the
say
things.
this. I mean, I hate seeing trees being cut down and...
You just were talking about cutting land down earlier.
Oh, but they're not trees. They're not trees. They're not real trees. They're blight. They're like a weed. They are actually. They're not deciduous trees, which are real trees. But I was going to say there about when you fly over this country, it is mostly green.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of space. And also, when you look at brown belt areas, what are they called? Brownfield. Brownfield sites.
Yeah,
we should be doing more. We just should be doing more than that.
But it's not just planning, it's like a whole raft of policies that will be contained in the Queen's speech next week. It's going to be a very busy speech.
I'd love to go through the last Queen's speeches and see how much they promised ever happened, ever took place.
You'll be sad about this. Just quickly, one thing has been dropped, though, from the Queen's speech. Lots of things are going to be allowed now. They're going to come out of EU legislation after 2 years. But there was a proposal to unban foie gras and real fur, and they've balked at that. They're not going to reintroduce
Quite right.
those.
Quite right. Yeah. Can't
because
go
there's been a backlash.
Yeah.
But they're going to... Tory government, let's all eat overstuffed goose and real sable.
No. Now, one of the biggest lovies in the land beside us now, the esteemed actor, Mr. Biggins here, and I don't do it now because I do admire your acting, my friend.
Thank you.
People, it's not noted enough. I mean, having acted with you in a sketch as well, I realise just what a force you are.
And we wore those lovely orange costumes.
Prison uniform, yes. Which is probably where we'll both end up. Christopher, the BAFTA Awards last night, the Lovey Love-In.
Yeah, it was good. I watched. Did you watch it? Anybody watch it? It was good, I thought.
It actually physically makes me vomit.
Does it?
Yeah. So
I recorded it and fast-forwarded
it's a love fest, and there's a lot of useless people, and it's all... What relevance does it have for people? Anyway, let's go into it. So it's...
Well, it's a bit of glamour.
It is a bit of glamour, but then it's...
She's wonderful, and she's won best actress.
Judy is... I think she's fabulous. What I loved about her last night, Jodie, was the fact that she kept saying, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by this. I'm embarrassed.
I'm scared.
I'm scared. But she did win the award for Best Actress, and I think she deservedly won it because she did the drama... which suggested that the government abandoned vulnerable people during the care home, which, of course, they did. And so it meant something, and it was a beautiful drama. Did you see it?
I didn't, but I've read all the plaudits.
Oh, it was fantastic. And she was just wonderful. And she had the most wonderful dress on last night, showing all her...
attributes.
Yes, what was it? Tributes, yes.
Attributes.
Attributes, oh right, the tributes.
She is knocking them dead in the West End at the moment, and it's a play where it's just a solo performance.
That's right.
Where she plays a barrister in this, so maybe that's a night out for us.
Yeah, it could be, yes, it could be.
But also, I gather last night at the BAFTAs became a big sort of celebration of Channel 4, which in itself was a political statement from the creative industries, and I wondered what you thought of that.
Well, I think it was good that they should say that, because I think, Channel 4 is probably one of the best channels we have.
Do you get any work on it?
I do, actually.
Do you?
Yeah. You don't?
No. I get a bit of Gogglebox, I'm lying.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, you're on Celebrity Gogglebox.
Yeah, a bit of that done.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm looking over the front pages of the newspapers today. Not one of them is covering Northern Ireland and the Assembly elections. Not one of them. Not one of them.
Telegraph.
This Telegraph.
Where?
This Govak and Sunak meddling to stop Trust
Take that back.
protocol
One of them
plan.
Right.
Yeah, and lucky me drew the short straw of explaining the Northern Ireland situation.
Eamonn will help out.
Right,
Time starts
Here's
now.
your Ladybird guide to the Northern Ireland problem. So, Northern Ireland is on the island of Ireland, but is part of the United Kingdom. Is that correct?
So far, so good.
Yeah. Right, good, because I'm never sure whether it's United... Because Isle of Man's not United Kingdom, but it's in Great Britain. It's very complicated. So we joined the EU, we left the EU, so we all come out, and but the problem is we've got a border with the Republic of Ireland, who are still in the EU, so we have to have... The EU insists some kind of customs control so that you can't drive a lorry from Liverpool...
into Dublin,
into Belfast from Holyhead, and then slip across the border without paying any tariffs and stuff into the EU. So it's a massive problem. I really don't understand how it's going to be resolved, because if you're a unionist, you believe in the United Kingdom and you don't want a border. If you're a Republican, and Sinn Féin have just won the election, they're the majority party, then you're intent on a completely united island of Ireland.
And the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in Europe.
Although the Sinn Féin party won the election, the opinion polls are showing that the majority of people wish to remain in the United Kingdom. And the DUP, who are the leading unionist party, have said they will not cooperate with Sinn Féin in reopening Stormont and having a devolved government there. And Liz Truss is trying to storm in and sort this out, and she's getting resistance from fellow cabinet members who fear it could bring on a full-scale trade war with the EU. So blessed is the man who resolves this issue.
But really, from a Northern Ireland point of view, it is simple as this.
Go on.
We do not believe that Westminster cares. We particularly don't believe that Boris Johnson has any grasp of the detail.
Well, I heard somebody comment the other day who was in a position to know that Boris Johnson doesn't understand Northern Ireland. So hopefully just heard my cut out and keep guide. But go on.
But that's basically what I was saying, and I'm sure a lot of people in Scotland will feel exactly the same about this. And Johnson needs
try living in Rochdale and see if you're understood in
but I think the context, Eamonn, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's not just the worry about a trade war breaking out, it's about returning to the Troubles. And obviously the Good Friday Agreement was just so... Well, it ended years and years of awful experiences that you grew up seeing, and nobody wants to go back to that, and that is the fear. That is the fear, because we're in this situation where you've got, elections that were supposed to end the deadlock would have just resulted in further deadlock. So where do you go from
where you go from here is, as soon as the majority of people in Northern Ireland wish a border poll, it will happen, no matter what Westminster says, because it's enshrined in international law. And then if the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to remain in the United Kingdom or want a united Ireland. That will be the will of the people, and that's the way we stand on that.
It's 100 years, it's sort of symbolic, it's 100 years since the Easter Rising of 1922 and the independence from the United Kingdom of Ireland. It's not that long, is it? Sorry.
Right, so we've got Christopher here. There's two stories to deal with actors here. One actor sadly passed away, and a new actor who we're going to see on the scene. Tell us more.
Well, Dennis Waterman sadly died yesterday, only 74 years old.
Really young.
Yes, really young. 1 year older than me, so you get a bit sort of nervous as you read things like this. But he was a wonderful actor, and he was a great character. He was very charismatic, he was tricky. I worked with him on Minder. I played a tailor that George Cole went to. Of course, a perfect tailor I was. You know, it was wonderful. But he was terrific, and he did so many, the Sweeney, the Minder, and then, of course, he did New Tricks, which he was brilliant in. And he was a great actor. He was a womanizer, married 4 times.
Lived life to the full, is the phrase they like to use.
Lived life to the full, yes, exactly. I've been trying to find out, but it doesn't say in any of the papers what he died of. Do you know what he died of?
No.
Well, you can read between the lines, but he died in hospital, so it was something that they knew was there. It wasn't a sudden death.
Right, yes.
And it was in Spain with his wife by his side there. Yeah. Now, coming on the scene, a new Doctor Who.
Yeah, Ncuti Gatana, who... I had never heard of him because I didn't see the Sex Education, sadly. I must now watch it. He was deeply attractive, I thought, last night on television. I mean, he is a gorgeous black man. Beautiful. And
I didn't think he needed to have his boobs out.
Oh, I thought that was rather wonderful.
Oh, well, each to their own.
Yeah, I thought, well, so many of the women had their boobs out last night. Why don't the men?
A bit of flesh.
Yes, and he was charming, I thought. So I thought I might start watching Doctor Who
I've heard rave reviews of Sex Education that...
yeah, you haven't seen it either.
I haven't seen it.
Guess we should watch it together.
OK, we'll have a little Netflix and chill.
Exactly.
Of a different kind of nature.
Guys, for the moment...
We'll to leave it there.
Yeah, thanks very much. They're going to be back in 40 minutes' time. Let's bring you up to date with the news with the time approaching 10 minutes to 7.
Boris Johnson has told members of the G7 the world must go further and faster to support Ukraine. In a virtual meeting with the Ukrainian president, the Prime Minister and world leaders agreed to intensify economic pressure on Vladimir Putin in any way possible.
The Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, will meet party leaders at Stormont later today to press for the return of devolved government. This follows Sinn Féin's historic result in the Assembly elections, which saw them secure 27 seats, and the Unionist Party, the DUP, win 25.
Ukraine's president says around 60 people who'd been hiding from shelling in a school in Luhansk have been killed by Russian bombs. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has called the deliberate targeting of civilians a war crime.
It looks a lovely day, at least it does here in London. Let's go out and about around the country. Where are we going? Well, it's time for On Your Doorstep.
So every Monday we get out and about to speak to you. We are the People's Channel, and today our reporter Will Hollis is in Ripley in Derbyshire, not to be confused with Ripley in Surrey. Tell us more, Will. Good to see you. Or should the Harry Potter look is back?
Good morning. Do you know what? It's gone down so well on Twitter that I'm just going to keep going with it. My eyesight isn't actually that bad, but sometimes in the mornings I do feel a little bit strained. Of course, it is a little bit early, but we are out here on your doorstep in Ripley. Let's just have a little quick look around. So this is a town in Derbyshire of about 20,000 people. Lots of people are already going to work. Lots of people taking their nice morning drive to wherever they're going to, Derby, Nottingham. It's about half an hour to each of those destinations. Where we are in Ripley, it's a real heritage centre for engineering, for industrial aspects of the last 200, 300 years. But now a lot of people, they're living here and working here. We didn't get a chance to get something to eat before we started the day. I was a little bit late getting out of bed, so we thought we'd come here and see what we could get, a little bit of a local delicacy, and this is one that I think you'll quite like, Eamonn, because we found this place. It's called the Cob Stop, and it looks like one of those places where you can get whatever you want inside of one of those buns. Hello, hi, we're from GB News. We're live on TVM radio this morning. Is there any chance that we can come inside and sample one of these famous cobs?
Of course you can, yeah.
Fantastic. Jump in. Let's go. Oh, wow. And it's lovely and warm in here. It's not too cold in Ripley today. It's about 7 degrees, but it's always really nice and warm to come into a place like this. I'm Will. I cover the East Midlands, so Derby, so Ripley. What's your name?
Coletta.
Coletta, what do you do here? What is the cob stop?
Well, we fill cobs, hot, cold, and cakes and drinks, and we provide takeaway snacks mostly.
A cob is something that if you're down south, if you're up north, you've probably never heard of it. What is a cob to people that aren't from this region?
Well, it's a bread product that comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, white, wholemeal, granary, probably known as a roll or a bap or bread cake, whatever you know it as, but here it's a cob.
It's quite political. If you go outside of Notts, Nottinghamshire or Derbyshire, it might be called something completely different. And I've had arguments with people from quite close to where we are in places like Doncaster, only half an hour away, or only 45 minutes away, and it's quite a big deal. Let's just have we got a cob? There's one, yeah. So here we go. Eamonn, Isabel, that's what a cob looks like. But we aren't just talking about bread products today. There's obviously lots of different things going on in the world of news. The big one at the moment is this Beergate, the potential party, the drinks that Keir Starmer had, and we know that the Prime Minister has already been fined, on-the-spot fines for his involvement in different parties. How does that feel as somebody that runs a business?
Disappointing, very disappointing. You're supposed to lead by example, especially in that kind of position of power, so I think it created a lot of upset.
Are you happy to see that these parties or potential drinks, these work gatherings, as some people might call them, are being investigated?
Yeah, definitely. They should be subjected to the same as anybody else.
What was it like that period when we were all locked down for you as a business owner?
Awful. I agreed with it. It had to be done. Something drastic had to be done. It was something that nobody could foresee, and something had to be done, and that was what had to be done. But as a result, it has left us in debt and struggling and trying to claw our way back.
And that's all going on whilst the cost of living crisis is happening. It must be really tough for a business owner.
Well, it feels like everything's being thrown at us because we were just starting to claw our way back as lockdown was lifted and people were starting to come out again. We were getting more custom, and then cost of living. And particularly for us, it's been more like the food side, obviously, because that's where we look. There's shortages of lettuce, of all things. People are wondering why there's no lettuces. Tomatoes, they used to be £6 to £7 a box. They're now looking at £14 to £16 a box. And this all obviously has a knock-on effect for us and the consumers.
I think from some of the places that I've been to in Ripley while I've been looking into these kinds of stories, sugar is something that you can't get hold of. Are you finding that there's certain things that you just can't get?
Yeah, well, like lettuce especially. We struggle, we go around everywhere. And when you do eventually find one, it's doubled in price and it's shrunk in size. So you're needing more at a higher cost.
Well, that's made me really hungry. I think I'm going to have to grab a cob. Eamonn, Isabel, usually whenever I go out to these places, I like to send something back to you, but I'm not sure it'll be fresh when it gets to you in a couple of days, so I think I'll just keep this one for myself.
Fair enough, Will, fair enough. We take that. Thank you very much indeed, making us quite hungry this time of the morning. Nothing like a bit of that cob sliced, some nice butter on top of it, and a soft-boiled egg.
Or maybe some really crispy bacon. Streaky.
And as well as...
some brown sauce.
That could be
What are you having this morning for breakfast? Let us know. Stay with us. We're going to be asking, well, it's a very serious question, if the breakup of the United Kingdom is on the cards after that historic Sinn Féin victory in Northern Ireland.
But first, let's have a look at the weather picture. We think it's going to be good.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens. Moving into northern England, and it will also be dry there, but the cloud will be in on the increase, especially in the west. Winds will also be strengthening here, especially over the Pennines. Up into Scotland, and it's a very different story here, with a band of wet and windy weather moving across the country. Feeling much cooler here too, much more than yesterday. The wet weather will also be affecting Northern Ireland this lunchtime, with the raining turning heavy at times. Combined with strengthening winds, it will also be feeling pretty miserable here. The rain will be slowly tracking back south-eastwards throughout the rest of Monday, although much of the south is staying dry until after dark. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Are we a step closer to the breakup of the United Kingdom?
A very good morning, good to see you. 7 o'clock is the time. You're tuned in to breakfast here on GB News on this Monday, the 9th of May, with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster, leading the news this morning.
Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis will meet Stormont leaders today in a bid to restore power sharing, calling it a significant moment for Northern Ireland. He'll also hold talks with the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney to discuss last week's shock results.
Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has pulled out of a keynote speech amid growing questions about whether he broke COVID rules.
The event at the Institute for Government think tank was due to discuss the challenges that the country faces.
Vladimir Putin is mirroring the fascism of the Nazis, the Defence Secretary will say today, ahead of the Kremlin's annual Victory Day parade.
In a major speech, Ben Wallace will also directly criticise Russia's military commanders for their complicity in war crimes.
Thanks very much indeed for all you're having to say today on all the news stories that we are covering. Arthur says, I live in Newry, which is a border town in Northern Ireland, and I think there is a lot of distraction in the media towards us. Northern Ireland seems like an afterthought or an inconvenience. We cannot be an afterthought. This election does really matter.
Yeah, Dennis says this is so frustrating. Boris should act now before it's too late. Northern Ireland needs help and a clear plan. Where is it?
OK, thanks for all of that. Cost of living as well, absolutely top of your thoughts and your priorities, as it is ours. Love the courage of the cost of living you've been doing over the last week. I think what was said about school uniforms is absolutely right. They should be subsidised for poorer families. Stephanie says, I live in Walton. I'm trying to change energy providers. The amount they make you go through because they need your money is outrageous. Why has neither party got a real plan? They just keep changing the subject.
Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or remember, you can tweet us at gbnews.
So, leading our news this morning, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, will hold talks today with the 5 major parties for the Stormont Assembly.
He conceded that the historic victory, which saw Sinn Féin become the largest party in the Assembly, was a significant moment for Northern Ireland. However, he made clear that his hope was still to form an executive as soon as possible.
He's also expected to meet with the Irish Foreign Minister this morning, who has warned that restoring the executive could take months.
Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, joins us this morning from Stormont and has the very latest on this. And I suppose the very worst fears this morning is whether or not this could possibly, in the long run anyway, lead to, well, the collapse of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I think in many ways, kind of Sinn Féin's victory, as significant as it was, becoming the largest party in Northern Ireland, Isabel, for the first time in its 101-year history, that a nationalist party, a party that wants to see reunification, has done that. It doesn't necessarily, at least in the short, or I would argue in the medium term, lead towards a united Ireland. And I'll explain that kind of in a second. But first of all, just on the politics of today, as you're right, I'm outside Stormont. MLAs are going to gather here later on. But the main business actually will be in the centre of Belfast later, where Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, is going to hold talks with the 5 key parties to try and see if there's a path through to get the Stormont executive back up and running again. The DUP, now the second largest party, the largest unionist party in Northern Ireland, effectively saying they're not prepared to go back into government. Government here has been suspended for months until the Northern Ireland Protocol is sorted out. Now, the Northern Ireland Protocol is part of that Brexit deal signed between the UK and the EU at the end of 2019, and it effectively keeps Northern Ireland inside the EU's customs union and the single market, in many ways dividing, putting a border, if you like, down the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The DUP either wanted substantially changed or scrapped altogether, and I think until there is progress on that, Isabel, I can't see the executive being back up and running here. How's progress going to be made? Well, Brandon Lewis and the British government have always said they want to do a deal with the EU. The EU at the moment don't seem willing to compromise, and that's why there's pressure on Boris Johnson, on the government, to go further and essentially to unilaterally take action to either change or to get rid of the protocol altogether, though that of course would have serious consequences for our relationship, the UK's relationship with the European Union. Just on your point about a united Ireland, I always try and emphasise this point, that in many ways actually this is not like Scottish independence, which in some ways is easier, if you like, Scotland leaving the UK, because what you get with Irish unification is 2 countries trying to come together effectively after 100 years apart, and that is a process that frankly politicians across this island know is not something that's going to happen in a matter of years, but potentially a decade at least, if not longer, and that again is predisposed on the fact that people want that. And frankly, when you look actually at the polls and indeed the results over the last couple of decades, support for the union here has remained pretty steady, and there's no suggestion, despite Sinn Féin's victory, that actually a majority of people here in Northern Ireland want to see United Ireland anytime soon.
But meanwhile, Darren, we're left with this appalling situation that while the DUP will not sit down and form a government, what happens about the day-to-day running of Northern Ireland? The terrible crisis, the health services in there. People went out, it seems to be, they weren't voting on a United Ireland or a border poll, they were voting on the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, indeed, Eamonn, and that is one of the reasons actually that the Alliance Party, the centrist party that claims it's neither nationalist or unionist, did so well, because its main argument, and to be fair, other parties' arguments as well, is what people fundamentally want is they want to see the people at the top of the hill behind me actually sit down and start sorting out some of the issues that really matter day-to-day life to people here. As you say, the health service, a bit like elsewhere in the UK, is in a really difficult situation, but there's also 300 million quid that is locked up that the British government have given the Northern Ireland executive, but it cannot spend because the executive hasn't been formed for months in order to make a decision about how to spend it, and that at a time in which the cost of living crisis is hitting household incomes here. And we have to remember, this is also a part of the UK that on the whole is more socially deprived than elsewhere, where frankly they probably need help a bit more. And that is where there is frustration, and Eamonn, you know this, when you talk to people here, they just want politicians to get down, to make decisions, to make their lives better. And frankly at the moment, a lot of them are pretty angry. Turnout was not great this time round, pretty angry that they're not doing so.
Darren, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much indeed. Darren McCaffrey there, live from outside the Stormont Parliament in Belfast.
Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has pulled out of a keynote speech where he was set to speak on challenges that the country faces amid this growing question about whether or not he broke lockdown rules.
Well, for more, let's speak to Henry Hill. Henry is the deputy editor at Conservative Home. Henry, very good to see you. It's almost as if you couldn't make this up as to what's happening. And the thing that surprises me is that all the things Keir Starmer criticised the government and Boris Johnson for doing, he's following the same template. No, there was no party. No, we didn't eat anything. Yes, it was a working meeting. It was exactly the same defence that he poo-pooed when Boris Johnson put it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most striking things for me, as someone who previously thought that Keir Starmer had actually had a pretty good Partygate so far, is that you see him making all the mistakes that the government made. I said at the time, the problem with what Boris Johnson was doing is that instead of getting ahead of this story, ahead of drawing the sting out of it by fronting up to everything that had happened, there was this constant chain of denials. Those denials would then fall apart. That put the story right back at the top of the headlines. And that happened several times. And so Partygate never went away as a story, no matter how hard the government tried to move on. And we can see the same thing here. It is absolutely extraordinary, and it has robbed Starmer of what ought to be quite a lot of momentum coming out of these local elections.
When you say he should have had quite a lot of momentum coming out of these elections, it wasn't a great result for him either. He's clearly rattled by that. And as you say, this leaked memo over the weekend, which appears at least to sink his story. And given that he has called for Boris Johnson's resignation on this very matter, can we expect him to resign if the police do go ahead and fine him, do you think? And do you think that will be the expectation that people will want to see?
I think if he is fined, it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for Starmer to get out of resigning. If he didn't, it would completely destroy his credibility. But the thing to remember is that actually Starmer suggested the Prime Minister should resign for coming under investigation. He didn't wait until Boris Johnson actually received a fine to call for his resignation. He also called for Rishi Sunak to resign for merely sort of arriving at a meeting 10 minutes early and being served some cake and a Coca-Cola. I think the problem for Starmer is that the way he's gone about, prosecuting the government over this, the very, very high standards he's set, and how easily and how quickly he has called for resignations, mean that he's now risks looking like a hypocrite, which is one of the most dangerous things in politics.
OK, so what happens now? I mean, obviously his alibi has fallen down. The police are to investigate. I mean, are we just going to see him disappear from the public eye for the next few days, do you think? And as we've all been doing with the Conservatives, who can you imagine replacing him if he were to resign?
Well, I mean, it may be that he has to keep his head down. He, as you say, he's pulled out of this. He's pulled out of this event today. I think it's one of those things where whenever he does put his head up, the journalists are just going to ask him about Partygate. So maybe he will end up sort of hiding away behind the scenes. As for who could replace him, you saw in the media over the weekend that several Labour MPs are already apparently on manoeuvres, including Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, Lisa Nandy, and people like that. I think that actually Labour, when it comes to a leadership contest, are probably in a fairly good position, and that they do have several MPs who could make plausible challenges. But it'd be unfortunate for them to have to do it yet again before the general election.
Henry, are you surprised there hasn't been more criticism of Angela Rayner in all of this? All of this rage seems to be directed towards Sir Keir Starmer, presumably because he's led the charge against Boris Johnson and those claims of hypocrisy. But, of course, if she was there all along, why didn't she come out and say so?
A little, and I think it actually follows on from this other story that we saw about Angela Rayner last week or the week before, in which once again she was found to be, not being entirely truthful about what had happened. So this does seem to be a pattern. I think that if whether or not the press are focusing on her now, if Keir Starmer had to resign over this sort of beer and curry affair, it would be essentially impossible for Angela Rayner to run for the leadership, which I think we all know she wants, but on that basis, because she couldn't take Starmer's job on the basis that he had to quit for attending a party she was also at. So her future is very much on the line, but you're right, she's not front and centre at the moment.
OK, Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home website. Good to talk to you as always. Thanks for coming on the show.
12 minutes past 7. News headlines are these. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will use a major speech today in London to say that Russian President Vladimir Putin is mirroring the actions of the Nazis through the invasion of Ukraine. This comes as Russia will stage an annual military parade later today to celebrate victory in World War II.
Britain's town centres to be given a new lease of life, with derelict shop fronts to be transformed. The move is to be announced in tomorrow's Queen's speech during the state opening of Parliament. The Prime Minister says the plans will give councils extra powers to force landlords to rent out empty shops.
The actor Dennis Waterman has died at the age of 74. He was recognised at last night's BAFTA ceremony. Best known for his starring roles as sidekick to... who was it? John Thaw, wasn't it, in The Sweeney, of course, and as Terry McCann in Minder. And so that was George Carter he played in The Sweeney. His family says he passed away peacefully in hospital in Spain. His wife was by his side. Here's a disturbing story. Police in the Bahamas are investigating the deaths of 3 Americans. This was at a sandals resort. Now, while there is no official confirmation of the cause of the deaths, it's believed to involve a faulty air conditioning unit. So let's talk to Simon Calder, travel correspondent of The Independent. I've heard things like this related to Legionnaire's disease, Simon. I mean, I'm not sure. What are you hearing, or what could this possibly be, and how common would something like this be?
Well, what we know about this tragedy, Eamonn, is that it was at the Emerald Bay Resort on Grand Exuma. Sandals, the resort, has told me that it is with great sadness we can confirm the passing of 3 guests at the resort on the 6th of May. A health emergency was initially reported. Following our protocols, we immediately alerted emergency medical professionals and relevant local authorities to provide support and investigate the situation. They say they're supporting the investigation and the family, and that there is nothing they can add at the moment other than safety is, of course, the most important thing for their guests.
Yeah, and look, Simon, I appreciate you're not a doctor, but lots of people watching this will be thinking, oh, my goodness, I had no idea that air conditioning could be dangerous. So what's the theory? How did this possibly cause the deaths of 3 guests at this hotel?
Well, of course, we are thousands of miles away, and there will be experts on the site. There are reports, and these seem to be coming from the Health Minister, that there was some kind of problem with, quotes, a toxic coolant leaking. We have no idea if that is the case, of course, and there will be investigations continuing. There are, very sadly, kind of echoes of the tragic case that we heard about in August 2018, when a British couple from Lancashire were very sadly found dead at the Steigenberger Aqua Magic Hotel in Hurghada in Egypt. Again, there was an inquest which was held, and the conclusion was mixed, although a British safety expert said that there appeared to be some kind of toxic substance that had leaked into their room, possibly via the air conditioning.
Gosh.
And that had brought about their deaths.
What do you do when you're checking into a room? Do you have a look around, or what should we be having a look around for? Because, I mean, you just don't think of all the things you're worried about. You don't think, well, the air conditioner's going to kill me.
No, and these things are fortunately so rare that it's something that simply I don't worry about. I mean, I tell you, the first thing I do in any hotel, particularly if I'm on one of the upper floors, is work out exactly where the fire exits are and how I'm going to get out in an emergency. That's much more of a significant risk.
Yes, yeah.
The way that these things work is that, of course, every country has its own rules that have to be followed. But above all that, the package travel regulations in the UK mean that if you are going with a British company, TUI, Jet2, Virgin Holidays or whoever, they have a duty of care absolutely to make sure that you are going to be safe. And so they will actually go around with their own very rigorous inspections and make sure that the equipment is safe. But ultimately, very sadly, there is no way to be absolutely sure what the condition of the equipment is, and if there is one in a million fault that happens, then it's very, very difficult to prevent that completely.
And would this be in any way, this toxic air incident, whatever they're describing it, would that be linked in any way to carbon monoxide poisoning, or are these two separate things? Because I've got into the habit of travelling with a carbon monoxide alarm, because I've interviewed so many people who've either lost people or ended up sort of semi-paralysed in this awful state of pain for the rest of their lives.
Oh, it's just awful.
Poisoning.
And of course, it takes us back to 2006 in the case of Christy and Bobby Shepherd, who were 7 and 6 at the time. They were on a Thomas Cook holiday to Corfu. There was a faulty gas boiler in their apartment, and they very sadly were found dead as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning. No, I mean, that is actually, and that's such an important point, carbon monoxide is something you can take preventative measures against. You can take alarms. You can do everything yourself to prevent against that. But that always tends to be in a situation where you've got something actually burning. In the case of the Bahamas tragedy, that does not appear to be a factor. So they are similar circumstances, but very different causes.
Just when we thought we heard it all in terms of cancellations of airlines or air routes, so EasyJet at the moment is cancelling around 70 flights a day because of staff shortages, but it doesn't end there. What's the latest trick they've come up with?
This is an interesting one. EasyJet has a fleet of 126 Airbus A319s. They're sort of slightly shorter, stubbier flights. You must have thought of, you might have boarded one and thought, oh, this looks a bit short. But they seat 156 people. The thing is, every 50 people, or fraction thereof, according to the Civil Aviation Authority rules, you've got to have one member of cabin crew. So, given that there is a general shortage of cabin crew, EasyJet tell me overnight actually that they're cancelling now only about 30 flights a day, which is a bit better. But if you can save cabin crew by only employing 3, then you're going to be able to run more flights. And so therefore they are literally taking out row 26 of their Airbus A319s that run in the UK in order to run them with 3.
So just 6, just row 26, so just 6 seats.
6 seats, that takes the total passengers down to 150. It means you only need 3 cabin crew instead of 4. So you might be waiting a bit longer for your cup of tea, but they will be able to make more flights.
So physically they're taking these seats out?
Yes.
Why don't they just not sell row 26?
Really good question. In the 2000s, which I think I'm the only person who can remember, they did exactly the same thing, but they just put a big black cross on 6 of the seats and you weren't supposed to sit there. But now under the Air Navigation Order 2016, you physically, I understand, have to remove the seats.
That's nonsense. Why? I don't understand why.
Well, just that's
give some people some space to spread out.
Well, I did ask them, but you see, because if you moved every seat just a little bit back, everyone would get 2 inches extra of legroom, but they're not doing that.
They like
taking
to impose misery on us.
In case we get used to it, that's fine.
Anyway, so if you're looking for new furniture for your front room, then maybe get some EasyJet seats.
Thanks very much, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Calder there. 7:20 coming up. We'll take a look at the top sports stories, including Manchester City's big win. It was a big win in many ways against Newcastle yesterday. All that to come after your weather picture.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens. Moving into northern England, and it will also be dry there, but the cloud will be in on the increase, especially in the west. Winds will also be strengthening here, especially over the Pennines. Up into Scotland, and it's a very different story here, with a band of wet and windy weather moving across the country. Feeling much cooler here too, much more than yesterday. The wet weather will also be affecting Northern Ireland this lunchtime, with the raining turning heavy at times. Combined with strengthening winds, it will also be feeling pretty miserable here. The rain will be slowly tracking back south-eastwards throughout the rest of Monday, although much of the south is staying dry until after dark. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Still to come on this morning's programme. We're live and on your doorstep in Ripley in Derbyshire. That's just before 8 to get your take on the big stories of the day.
Also coming up, are you a hay fever sufferer? Because if you are, you'll be struggling to get hold of the right medication.
Yeah, you're not alone if that is the case. Dr Sarah Kayat will be joining us with tips on how to beat the sniffles around 8:15.
Well, you've been sneezing, he's been sneezing. Is it cold? Is it hay fever?
It is hay fever, yeah. I had acupuncture when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And that helped it, but still...
Oh, did they?
Oh, yeah. I used to have, there was like a couple of needles right in the nose. It really made the eyes water.
Yes.
I don't know whether it helped or just takes your mind off the fact that you're sneezing.
That sounds horrendous,
yeah.
Right, well, Liverpool will be taking their mind off winning the Premier League title after City's result yesterday.
Yes, I think so. The story is not so much the 5-0 against Newcastle, and I mean that's the way you want to go out after Liverpool.
They're running out of matches now, though, aren't they?
They are. 3 left. So Pep Guardiola, though, said yesterday, I don't think he's doing this to be a siege mentality to the rest of the team, but saying everybody wants us to lose. Everybody wants Liverpool to win the Premier League, which, firstly, I don't believe is true. What would you prefer?
Well, you're asking me. This is between a rock and a hard place.
It really is. Could it be any worse between Man City and Liverpool for a Manchester United fan?
Oh, dear.
You can't answer. I was speaking to people, and I was to United fans, and they're going, definitely we prefer Man City. We definitely prefer Man City. But it couldn't be worse for you, could it?
The overall amount of titles. Though.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
But yet Jurgen Klopp may have implied yesterday, look, it's all over, which can be, reverse psychology sort of thing, that hopefully, City will think it's all over as well and take their foot off the gas.
Well, I don't think that's ever going to be the case.
No,
and also, we're looking at the fact that they've been knocked out of the Champions League. Man City fans, and Manchester City as a club, are going to say, the most important thing is the Premier League. But losing that semi-final and not being able to win that Champions League final, which surely is so important because that's the gap that's left in the trophy cabinet.
Yeah.
But Premier League, it looks like it's going to be theirs, but it ain't over yet. It is not over yet.
But a great
they look
response from City.
Absolutely,
after,
no question.
European results and whatever it is. So decisive. But then we get to the bottom of the table. Well, it's both ends here, really. It's a European qualification. Big win for Arsenal. Big defeat for Leeds at 2-1. With 10 men.
Oh, dear, Luke Ayling. And I'm just thinking, what are you doing? This is a two-footed challenge, two-footed lunge. They've already conceded 2 goals. And Meslier, the Leeds goalkeeper, a howler. It's one of these, where I'll dribble it. I'm good with the ball. I'll move it to the. Then the ball's taken straight off him, and they score, and then it's 2-0. And then Luke Ayling goes in with a double-footed challenge. There's no need for it, and it's irresponsible. And as far as the club's concerned and fans are concerned, you are letting your club down. So it was ridiculous. So anyway, they got a goal back. Wasn't enough. Not good news for Spurs fans, wherever they may be. The fact that Arsenal have gone 2-1, so then they're 4 points above Spurs with that big North London derby, which happens on Thursday.
It's a must-win for Tottenham,
that
one.
Absolutely must-win.
So when we look at the bottom of the table, Watford, Norwich already down, and then you've got Leeds on the same points, but much worse goal difference than Burnley. And then Everton on 35 points, 1 point ahead, but a game in hand.
One game in hand.
It seems to me as if they've probably just done enough.
You would think so. I mean, it's a great result against Leicester, and they won away for the first time in goodness knows how long. I'm just looking at fixtures. So Leeds have got to play Chelsea at home, ain't going to be easy. Brighton, they're playing at home, and then Brentford away, which is a tricky fixture. Burnley have got Spurs away, Villa away, Newcastle at home, and Everton with Watford away, who are already down. They've got Brentford at home, and they've got Crystal Palace as well. So I think it's looking up. But the thing is, I'm saying this every week. It changes every week. It looks like Leeds at the moment.
And look at the way things change. I mean, an Everton victory over Leicester, and yet it wasn't so long ago that everybody was saying Brendan Rodgers for Man United manager.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then his season's
he's had a lot of injuries. I mean, I'll give him that. There's been a lot of injuries.
Sitting in 14th place.
There's been the games in Europe as well, but
West Ham, just looking at them, 7th in the table.
Yeah.
Is there a 7th? There's a 7th place, isn't there? A conference?
Yeah, 7th.
Place?
Yeah, conference.
Europe. Yeah.
They beat Norwich 4-0 away. I mean, Norwich are dead and buried. So can we judge anything from West Ham going to Norwich and winning 4-0?
Well, West Ham will want to be back in Europe after.
Of course they are. Yeah, of course they are. And the Conference League has proved to be a pretty good competition. I mean, Leicester have done well. They got to the semi-final. Obviously, they got beaten by Roma. But it is a good European competition. So being in Europe, I always feel this. I know there are some clubs that think, oh, well, if it's not the Champions League, what's the point? It takes too long. We should be challenging in the Premier League. You're fighting to be in Europe. So get in Europe and then spend some time enjoying playing in Europe.
Women's Super League, Chelsea champions there.
Yeah, Chelsea again, Emma Hayes' side, third time. They are dominant, really. They're a dominant force in WSL. Came down to the wire. It looked for a moment, Arsenal did go ahead and they were top of the WSL at half-time, but then against West Ham, and then Chelsea came through. So very, very good side, Chelsea. So congratulations
Paul,
to them.
thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
And applause and respect to this man who's played through the whole of this game with an injury. Big injury.
The old dislocated shoulder again.
Yeah.
Do I look like I'm leaning to one side slightly?
You look really well on
You
it,
look
Paul.
good.
I'm not going to lie.
The drugs mustn't have worn off yet.
It's the drugs and the makeup, quite frankly.
You
That's
need
what it is.
the op. Get it done, you poor thing.
Okay.
You need to
Can we do
get
it
your
live on the
shoulder
air,
done.
maybe?
Yeah, we'll do a little...
It'd be a ratings winner, I tell you.
What I thought, put people off their cornflakes, why don't you?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. We'll do it in the evening.
See you again soon,
Thank you, Paul.
Right, stay with us. We're going to go through the papers this morning. Christopher Biggins and Liz Kershaw are back for that. See you in a mo.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Uh, 34 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock. You're tuned into breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Let's bring you up to date. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, will meet party leaders at Stormont later to press for the return of devolved government. It follows Sinn Féin's historic result in the Assembly elections, which saw them secure 27 seats and the DUP win 25.
The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, will use a major speech this morning to say that Russian President Vladimir Putin is mirroring the actions of the Nazis through the invasion of Ukraine. Russia today staging its annual military parade to celebrate victory in World War II.
Britain's town centres are to be given a new lease of life, with derelict shop fronts to be transformed. It's to be announced during the Queen's speech when a new Parliament begins tomorrow. The Prime Minister says the plans would give councils extra powers to force landlords to rent out empty shops.
A unique take on the newspapers. We welcome Liz Kershaw and Christopher Biggins. Very good to see you both.
Hi.
We're going to begin with the Times. With you, Liz, and this is page 6 in the Times, and they're talking about the Lib Dem revival in the council elections.
Yes, the Liberal Democrats did really well last week. Loads of new councillors, the new unitary authority in Somerset, they just swept the board. It's Lib Dem Central in the southwest. Again, it was 20, 15 years ago. And they took votes from the Conservatives in the so-called Blue Wall, the south of England, prosperous towns and rural areas. But they also took votes off former Labour Party voters who were perhaps saying, well, we voted for the Conservatives, we lent them our support, but we're not happy the way things are going. So senior Tories sound alarm over this is the headline. But I'm not sure they should be too shaken by it, because as many pundits have said in the last few days since Thursday's results, it's council elections. So it's not really about national government policy, and it's more of a protest vote, and it's voting for perhaps better local services. So in context, this is the best result for the Liberal Democrats at local elections since 2019, but the best results in terms of share of the vote was 2010, where David Cameron then had to rely on the Liberal Democrats to form a coalition.
I agree with Nick.
He could form
that year.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. Of course, the heyday for the Liberal Democrats was under the leadership of my friend Charles Kennedy and Hero, and they got up to, I think it was 58 MPs. Unprecedented. Of course, they then stabbed themselves in the back by getting rid of poor Charles, not supporting him. And, you know, he drank himself to death. But they've never really...
It sounds as if you're not going to forgive them for it.
I'm never going to forgive them.
Yeah.
I'm never going to forgive them for that. And they got down to, I think, 8 MPs was the lowest.
Yeah.
I had to laugh yesterday when the Sir Ed Davey, the leader, was saying, "Oh, we didn't break any rules." Well, you haven't got enough members for a proper full-flung party, you know, the old joke, in a telephone box. And I don't think people vote the same way at the next general election, do they? Because when it comes to that and the pound in your pocket and it's the economy stupid, I think they'll be forgotten about again.
OK. Look, let's all think about what we watch on the BBC, because, Christopher, the BBC is spending a lot of money to find out what its viewers watch and why people don't watch.
£50 million they're spending. Think of the programmes we could make for £50 million. Why don't they ask the public? Why don't they just... I mean, this is just the most ridiculous story. And Liz and I are infuriated with this. We just cannot believe this is what the BBC are going to spend. I mean, it's just a joke.
Mm-hmm. You would think you could have some sort of interactive electronic exchange.
Yes.
Send people emails and whatever. And I tell you, whoever they're paying 50 million quid are earning their money easily. But
they don't even talk to their own presenters who have, you know, daily interaction with the licence fee payer. If you go to management, which I have, and said, would you like a chat about what's going on the shop floor or what people want or what the listeners think? Mm-hmm. Not interested. They all live in a bubble. They all live in Chiswick. No offence to anybody who lives in that area. And West London. They get cars in. They don't use public transport, or they ride these carbon fibre bikes, as in W18, and they have no idea what goes on outside the M25.
Well, then they need to spend 50 million.
They do not. They do not.
Yeah. You know, I was having a think there, and the majority of BBC programmes that I would watch would be on channels like Gold and Yesterday and whatever. I mean, the sitcoms can't be beaten. You know, the Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, The Good Life, Dad's Army. You could go through all of these things. But they don't make them like that anymore.
They certainly don't. I mean, I find it very difficult to find a comedy programme now on BBC that I can enjoy.
Or indeed, but I mean, they're there whether people like it or not. The news is there and would have a big audience.
It's the David Attenborough, you know, those sorts of things. Or,
Match of the Day.
Yeah.
And actually, they do good dramas.
They do good dramas. Did you see Life After Life?
Yes.
Recently, that was fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Really they do good things. I can't believe that they feel the need.
Strictly Spring Watch, Autumn Watch, I love a bit of that.
I mean, there's a lot of good things when you look at it there. Is there anything anybody can think of that they shouldn't be making, or that you feel that where they get it wrong? I do think the BBC they get a right pasting sometimes. I mean, I do say this because there's no need to get this pasting. People complain and they say, we pay, what is the licence fee, 159 quid? Oh, we pay 150. Right, OK, good luck to you. Next time you're settling your Netflix bill or your Sky bill or your Amazon Prime bill or whatever. And I'll tell you what I don't like about viewing today. I'll watch something that you won't have watched and she might have watched, and then she'll recommend something. It's disjointed.
We never watched stuff together. There was a thing
time.
when, as of a nation, we'd watch something at 9 o'clock the night before and the whole country would talk about it the next day. We miss that now, don't we?
I think it is bad for society.
Yeah, because you go to school or work. And you'd, oh, did you see Monty Python last night? Or did you see, you know, But only Fools and Horses.
Years ago, we used to get 20 million viewers for a show. Now they get excited if there's 3.
I remember presenting the holiday programme on a Monday night, 8 o'clock, BBC One, 15 million viewers.
Yeah.
50, was regular.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
And on Radio 1, 17 million listeners.
Yeah.
It was just phenomenal.
Do you know what they also do really, really well, whilst we're bigging up the competition? It's children's television, and it's all British content. And in a world of Netflix, where my kids, everything is American that they switch on and watch there. Everything is wall to wall. Even the British shows, they then put American accents onto the Paw Patrol, so whatever it might be. But on BBC and CBeebies, it's such good quality, and it's got that commitment to educate at the same time.
But it's not on BBC anymore, though. You have to go to another channel to get children's television.
Really?
In my day, it used to be BBC One.
Oh, right, yeah. It's on CBeebies or CBBC, but they've got
it's
their
all.
own
I don't know where CBC is. I don't know where.
But the idea is, of course, if you went to a shop to get a magazine on cars or fishing or whatever it be, it's all separate. It's on a different shelf. So the idea that you can just have a melting pot for everything is like history. We sort of don't do that now anymore. But I don't think their competition, Isabel. I just think the BBC is unique, and we will miss it. We will miss it when it's gone.
I totally believe in the BBC.
Yeah.
I think it's great for national life, culture. Look at the fact that we've got them to organise the Queen's Platinum Jubilee coverage, etc. They do great things that bring the country together. I think Strictly Come Dancing, although I don't get it,
I love it.
That.
I just love it.
But it's great. It's just that the management.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll have to choose my words.
Yeah, but
I'm not a fan
again.
of the present incumbents.
Right.
Probably.
It's like the NHS, too much management. But here, 6.5 million is going to be set aside. This is where they go wrong. Into bespoke research on harder to reach niche and diverse audiences, obsessed with people who don't want to watch them and how we can get it, and then they make programmes for them which turns off everyone else.
Well, I'll tell you who's not covered by the BBC, and that's white working class lads in rundown areas of the post-industrial Britain, the North West, the Midlands, parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, South Wales. They don't get a look in now.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, and as we know, they desperately need it as well.
I was so pleased for Sean Bean last night, Sheffield lad. I mean, he's getting on a bit now.
But he's a
goodie one.
Yeah, he's a goodie. Christopher, can we talk about the Queen of Beans? Apparently the Duchess of Cornwall has been talking about her down-to-earth tastes in the Daily Mail today.
Well, I was on the show last week, and Oliver Dowden, the MP, had no idea what a tin of baked beans cost, and in fact he hadn't never had baked beans at all.
Well, I can forgive him for not knowing what it costs, because that's an easy one to score against MPs and things. But the never having tasted baked beans
and wouldn't. Apparently, I mean, and if I come home late and I've been out. Baked beans on toast.
Can't go wrong.
The best thing in the world.
Yes.
I mean, and a bit of cheese sometimes.
Yeah, maybe some Worcestershire sauce.
Oh.
Even some onions if you're feeling fancy.
Cheesy beans.
But Camilla now is, absolutely, the Duchess of Cornwall is revealed that she loves, her modest days, loves nothing more than Heinz beans on toast and fish and chips. She's gone up in my estimation.
Yeah.
Because I like both those.
Yeah.
Here's a story, Liz, about the energy crisis in the Daily Telegraph. Now, I look at this, and they say people who are energy poor, people who can't afford their bills, resort to burning wood. And I just shake my head. I mean, it used to be people used to go out and collect wood.
Yeah.
People used to bring wood back to their house to burn. Why is it so horrendous? Of all the things that are going to, blow up the planet, why is burning a stick?
That was my thought, Eamonn. I thought I grew up having to get up in the morning with ice on the inside of the windows.
Yeah.
A tub of lard and a handful of grub. But my dad used to get up first and light the fire, and then we'd gather round it to get dressed.
With the fire lighters and the sticks on top of it.
And when I was a bit older, I had to go home from school and light the fire.
Yeah.
But they'd said it's a health and safety thing. It's the fire service saying,
yes.
Oh, people are now lighting real fires in the homes and it's going to cause more fires. Well, I think, thank goodness for open fireplaces, because I stocked up with logs. I thought I'm going off grid. I'll just have a nice fire, log fire, won't turn the boiler on if it comes to it. And
But strictly speaking, are you allowed to? Or is it a smoke?
I was going to say, it's smoke, I think, isn't it? That's one of the main problems.
No, it's this one particular case that's caused this alarm is some guy, it sounds like he chopped up some... There's wood you should not burn on your indoor fire, like old fencing or pallets, because it's treated and it's not meant to be burned indoors, and apart from anything else, it gives off toxic chemicals. But he must have put some big lumps of wood on, and it spread from the fire grate.
But let me ask you all this. Would you blame people who have to choose,
No.
to eat or heat? Would you blame somebody if they're burning wood at home?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
I've passed wood recently that wouldn't take any notice of by the roadside that's been cut down off hedgerows or trees that have been cut down. I thought, I'm coming back later, with my scruffy car, and I'm going to fill it up with wood. Why?
I remember as a child on Monday nights my mother bringing in the tin bath in front of the fire and filling it with hot water. That was my bath night.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Why did you do Monday and not Saturday?
I don't know. It's Monday night. At weekends, I was filthy.
Didn't go to church on a Sunday.
By the time you reached Sunday, you were minging. Minging by then.
Let's look at this. Oh, no, let's go to local traditions, Chris. Have you ever been to a cheese run? It was the cheese run in Dorset. I've been. It's crazy.
I haven't, but I'm fascinated by this picture in the Times, which is great. A local entrant in yesterday's Gold Hill Cheese Run in Shaftesbury, Dorset. This is the one you've been to?
Look, gosh, yeah, look, there they are.
That's not even the interesting bit.
But this is interesting. This man who's running up, he's very fit, running up with a big cheese on his shoulder, has no shoes on.
No.
I mean, I'd be absolutely in agony.
Oh,
do you know,
lacerated.
I realised I'm talking nonsense. I was talking about cheese rolling, which is clearly very different from
I
cheese
think so,
run.
yeah, I think
cheese
so.
rolling
I
is
wasn't gonna
also
pick
in
you up
that part
about
of the world around Gloucestershire when you have these steep hills and you run after and everyone breaks their wrists.
Yeah.
But I've not seen a cheese run.
Royal Ascot approaching. I think it's in June, is it?
June.
And you're taking a headline, Woke Ascot.
Yeah, well, if you're privileged enough, and some of us at this table are, because we're dames or knights of the realm or OBEs or whatever, and you're going in the royal enclosure with your top hat, you've got to wear a badge. You'll know more about this, Eamonn, with a prefix on of Mr, Mrs, Miss, but now you can have MX.
And what does
What's
MX
that?
It
mean?
means you don't want to identify as a particular gender. So there you are. So, although they still have rules on clothing, so the men have to wear...
Oh, right. So if you don't identify as a man or a woman,
can you have a rule?
what's the rule for the...
Well, you have MX on you.
No, but...
Oh, no, you still
still
have to keep to the dress code. It's a
But if you're an MX, what are you?
I didn't write the rules. I'm just...
You don't mix with anybody.
I know, but it's
You'll have to
confusing.
tick a box when you apply for your pass or your name badge. You'll have to decide what you are.
Fraught with problems, this.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
What are you, Eamonn?
Well, I've never had any argument that I'm a mister.
Yeah.
I've never really had any concern about that.
I wanted to be a boy when I was 7.
Did you?
I wanted to be an altar boy, and they weren't allowed unless you were a boy.
Yes, naturally.
But
Although I think they were
my
allowed
dad had a
now.
word, and I was allowed as an altar girl, and then I realised it wasn't that fun, so I stopped doing that.
Well, I wanted to be a nun, so we all make mistakes. But it says here, just to confirm, that the formal dress code for ladies and men will still apply. So it's a contradiction. Susie Lewis, a long-time member, said, it's funny how they can be so antiquated on the one hand and so woke on the other. MX looks like a cooking instruction, she said.
OK. Well, I got my hat last week. So
Did
I had
you?
to put that in advance, yeah. 7.5.
Is that big?
Circumference.
Oh, I'm 8 something. I think
I'm 7.
8 1/4, I think.
I've got giant
Small
head,
head.
so I'm probably bigger than all of you.
Why don't you put BMX on your badge and confuse everybody?
Might be tempted with that. Guys, thank you very much indeed. Christopher and Liz will be back in 40 minutes' time. The time, 10 minutes to 8. Up to date with the news, it looks like this.
The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis is to meet party leaders at Stormont later this morning to press for the return of devolved government. It follows Sinn Féin's historic results in those Assembly elections, which saw them secure 27 seats and the DUP win 25.
DUP being the Unionist Party. Passengers will be greeted by colourful flowers at major train stations across the country this morning. It's a bid to boost mental health.
Network Rail says it hopes they'll lift people's spirits during their journeys as it gives a nod to Mental Health Awareness Week.
Good night at the BAFTAs for Channel 4. Despite its uncertain future, the broadcaster won 5 awards, several award winners using their speeches to criticise the government's plans to privatise the channel.
OK, it's Monday. It's that time in the programme when we go on your doorstep.
Well, today we are in a place called Ripley. Our reporter Will Hollis travelled to this Ripley, which is based in Derbyshire.
Ooh,
Tell us more, Will.
Can you believe that view? I know that in Yorkshire, people call their backyard God's own country. But if I lived in Ripley, if I lived in Derbyshire, I would certainly contest for that title. Of course, Ripley is a population of about 20,000 people. 20,000 people probably feel quite lucky to call this place their home. But of course, Eamonn, Isabel, this isn't on your landscape. This isn't look at our view. This, of course, is on your doorstep, where we get out and we talk to real people about real issues. We've gone to a cob shop earlier. That's the place where you might get your local sandwiches, your local buns. But it is really about speaking to local people in their streets, in their local areas. We were having a little bit of a look around and we found this really nice little cul-de-sac where we saw a gentleman was up at the crack of dawn, essentially. So we thought we'd pop back and see him to see if he fancied having a little bit of a chat to us. So we're on your doorstep, live on TV and radio. Let's see if he's actually still awake, because he might be in the garden. Yes, he's here. Hello, sir. We're back. We're with GB News, live on your doorstep. Can we have a chat to you about the day's news?
You can, yes.
What's your name? My name's Will.
My name's Peter, Will.
Peter, we're in Amber Valley, we're in Ripley today to talk to real people about local issues. What's it like living in Ripley? Are you from here?
I'm new to Ripley. I've been here about 9 months.
9 months?
Well, more or less, yes. We moved here from Spain.
But you're born in Britain, are you? You're clearly not.
Yes,
you don't have a Spanish accent.
I'm English.
You're English. Why did you go to Spain?
Oh, well, just to have a bit of different culture, you know, and enjoy the sunshine.
Probably a lot sunnier than you get here in Ripley, despite it being a bright, beautiful day. Why would you come back from Spain?
Well, as we got older, we couldn't stand the heat in the summer, so we decided to move back.
An average day in the summer, what's that like in Spain?
Oh, very hot. It was nice if you went down the coast, but we lived inland, so it was really hot, you know, 45 degrees some days, and it just got too much.
You have a fantastic view. We were just admiring it, and I know that Eamonn and Isabel back in the studio were as well. What's it like actually living in this kind of an area?
Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, we're very pleased. It's a nice place, Ripley. Then we haven't got a car, so the bus service is very good. We can go in sort of 5 or 6 different places on the bus. We've got grandchildren here that pick us up. My children are nearby, so we've no need for a car. I don't want to drive in England. 17 years driving on the wrong side of the road, and at my age, you know what I mean.
And one thing that I've noticed from walking around, from speaking to people, is there is a real community. What's that like for somebody that, you know, is maybe a little bit older, maybe retired? What's the community like around in Ripley?
Well, we found it very good, yeah. I mean, this little area where we live, which you probably just photographed, we're a nice community. We all get on. We socialise a little bit, you know, but it's just nice. I can't say much more than that, really, can I?
You seem like a real cheerful person. If you had one piece of advice for people watching the show, starting their week, what would be your advice for being so cheerful?
Well, you've got to have a positive attitude. It's no use being negative, is it?
Positivity, that's the way forward. It's how we start our day. It's how we start our Monday. And when you're on a doorstep like this here in Ripley in Derbyshire, it's very hard not to be positive.
Not to be positive. Absolutely right, Will. Stunning views. Lovely to hear from Peter Ward. We are the People's Channel. We like to hear from folk like him. More of the same from you a little bit later on in the programme. Thanks for now, Will. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we're talking about Northern Ireland. We're asking this morning, is the breakup of the United Kingdom on the cards? All that and more after your forecast.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens. Moving into northern England, and it will also be dry there, but the cloud will be in on the increase, especially in the west. Winds will also be strengthening here, especially over the Pennines. Up into Scotland, and it's a very different story here, with a band of wet and windy weather moving across the country. Feeling much cooler here too, much more than yesterday. The wet weather will also be affecting Northern Ireland this lunchtime, with the raining turning heavy at times. Combined with strengthening winds, it will also be feeling pretty miserable here. The rain will be slowly tracking back south-eastwards throughout the rest of Monday, although much of the south is staying dry until after dark. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Tonight on GB News, at 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
As we wake up this morning, are we a step closer to the breakup of the United Kingdom?
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Monday the 9th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. The Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, will meet Stormont leaders today in a bid to restore power sharing. He calls it a significant moment for Northern Ireland.
He'll also be holding talks with the Irish Foreign Minister, Simon Coveney, to discuss last week's shock result.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pulled out of a keynote speech amid growing questions about whether he broke COVID rules.
The event at the Institute for Government think tank was due to discuss the challenges that the country is facing.
Vladimir Putin is mirroring the fascism of the Nazis, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will say today. That's ahead of the Kremlin's annual Victory Day parade.
In a major speech, Ben Wallace will also directly criticise Russia's military commanders for their complicity in war crimes.
Join in any of our discussions as you have been doing throughout the programme this morning. We happily reflect those. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or
you can tweet us at gbnews.
Well, look, here is our top story this morning. It is Northern Ireland, and the Secretary of State there, Brandon Lewis, is going to try to hold talks today to urge the parties in Northern Ireland to form a governing executive.
He conceded that the historic victory, which saw Sinn Féin become the largest party in the Assembly, was a significant moment for Northern Ireland. However, he made clear that his hope was still to form an executive as soon as possible.
Now, he's also expected to meet the Irish Foreign Minister, who has warned that restoring the executive in Northern Ireland could take months. We're going to get the take now from the political commentator Eamonn Malley on all of this. So many pieces to this jigsaw, Eamonn. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn.
So, the Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, he's going to try and hold talks today. Do we know of the DUP, the second biggest party, the Democratic Unionist Party? Are they going to attend?
Well, I would expect so. But, I mean, you say this is going to be a long haul. I don't think we're going to have a major breakthrough. The bottom line is the Democratic Unionist Party, throughout the campaign during the elections, continues to target the border and the Irish Sea and the Northern Ireland Protocol. That was our main plank, and they said there will not be an administration this side of some resolution of the protocol. Well, the protocol is very tricky for Boris Johnson and the British government, because should the British government act unilaterally or arbitrarily, the bottom line is, what happens then to trade negotiations with Europe? Those negotiations can become very tricky and, in fact, may not happen at all. So it's a very difficult situation for the British government as well as the Democratic Unionist Party.
Right, that is the here and now. That's what they've got to deal imminently with, to get somebody to govern the country. But also, maybe the headline story on this is the possibility of a united Ireland, which will please a lot of people, and it will obviously make a lot of people very frightful about this. But if you look at these results, although for the first time ever you have a nationalist party governing in Northern Ireland, does a vote for Sinn Féin necessarily mean a vote for a united Ireland, Eamonn?
No. Despite the fact that Sinn Féin have now got the largest number of representatives at Parliament buildings, doesn't automatically mean that a border poll will be happening very soon to decide whether the people of Northern Ireland remain part of the United Kingdom or become part of the Republic of Ireland. Nor does it mean that necessarily a united Ireland will emerge in the short term. Not at all. But symbolically, and this is what's really, really important, Sinn Féin being in the capacity or role of First Minister in Parliament buildings at Stormont, that is critical from a Republican point of view, and without a doubt, it will further support and encourage discussion about a new Ireland somewhere down the road. But at the end of the day, it's in the gift of the Secretary of State to decide whether we have a border poll, which would be called to decide whether Northern Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom or part of a new Ireland. So it won't happen in a hurry. The immediate question is whether the Democratic Unionist Party is prepared to go into administration with Sinn Féin. And it's an anathema to them. This is the first time in 101 years. But what this does mean, and this is very important for people living in Britain, on whom so much violence was visited by the IRA for 30 years. this particular development, with Sinn Féin now holding the post of First Minister, means in a sentence the end of the militant era of the IRA and republicanism, which we knew so much about and suffered so much here in Northern. That era is gone, and that's why there is reason for celebrating, generally speaking. But the Democratic Unionist Party believes that the border of the Irish Sea must go. That's their big thing.
But earlier that the views in Northern Ireland of Boris Johnson are sort of pretty much universally the feeling that he doesn't understand Northern Ireland. And it certainly seems, at least here in Westminster and certainly within Boris Johnson's cabinet, that there is no agreement on the best path forward. Reports on the front of the Telegraph today with Michael Gove and Rishi Sunak trying to stop Liz Truss from invoking Article 16, which is obviously to throw out the protocol. And Rishi Sunak quoted as saying that unilateral action is never really his approach. And there are concerns about what that could mean for the UK's relationship with America as well, of course.
Well, that is so. But let's be clear about this. Invoking Article 16 does not solve the problem. It's merely a mechanism, which is a mechanism within the arrangement to discuss problems. It doesn't actually change the situation. And anyone who thinks that it changes the situation and that the protocol disappears, they're delusional. That is not the reality. It's a mechanism which affords each side the right to examine something which potentially is not working out to the advantage of mutual societies. It's nothing more than that. It seems it's been promoted as something very drastic, very dramatic, but it's not like that. That's not the reality.
Is the reality, Eamonn, that from an administrative point of view, neither the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland are actually geared up for an all-Ireland?
Well, the bright boys, as I call them, the bright boys, the serious intellectuals in the British and Irish governments at European level and America, I'm quite sure, are examining what the implications would be in the eventuality of the emergence of a change of status within Northern Ireland. But we're a long way away from that. And in that eventuality, the British government, the Irish government, and Europe would have to finance those changes, because those changes, should the status of Northern Ireland change, those changes would cost an awful lot of money. And I think we would be examining parallel situations with East Germany and West Germany in that eventuality. We're not at that stage, but at the same time, the emergence of Sinn Féin as the largest party in terms of numbers, numerical representation at Stormont, will trigger further debate and escalate the debate about the change of status in Northern Ireland. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're facing a change of status in the short term. No, that would be delusional, and it would not be a fair analysis.
We've got to leave it there. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Eamonn Malley there, the political commentator, live from Belfast. The time is now 8 minutes past 8, and the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has pulled out of a keynote speech today as pressure mounts over the so-called Beergate scandal. Well, the controversy has overshadowed the local election results, but Labour has tried to paint as a victory. Let's look at the figures. Let's see how they mount up. Sir John Curtis is a polling expert and an analyst on these sort of things. So, John, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Eamonn.
So let me ask you this. If what we know about Beergate, if we knew that last Wednesday, or people knew that last Wednesday and Thursday, do you think the results would have been different in any way?
Well, maybe, but probably not. Certainly we did have some polling in advance of Thursday, which asked people both about whether or not they thought the Prime Minister had broken the rules and whether or not they thought Sir Keir Starmer had broken the rules. And certainly at that point in time, many fewer people thought that Sir Keir Starmer had broken the rules than had the Prime Minister. But of course, in a sense, the Conservatives, in urging the Durham police to investigate once more, are of course potentially playing with fire. I mean, should it emerge that Sir Keir, in the judgment of the police, did break the rules, and as a result he resigns, the pressure on the Prime Minister to resign particularly if he were to receive another fine, would of course be very substantial. So in a sense, yes, this for the time being put the pressure on the Labour Party and probably has caused Sir Keir not to make a speech today, but actually this could still rebound on the government if actually the judgment of the police were to be adverse for Sir Keir.
Very interesting. So I suppose what you're saying is it may well be more beneficial to both of them to let this quietly go away and do very little talking on it in the future.
Well, that might be true, except, of course, the anger that there has been amongst the public about the Prime Minister's alleged breaking of the coronavirus rules isn't something that's simply been manufactured by the Labour Party. It is something that's been very widely felt, basically because it reminds many people of various very painful sacrifices that they made during the lockdown, like not being able to attend the funeral of loved ones, not being able to hold their hand when they were dying, or to visit relatives with dementia. And certainly, one of the lessons of the local elections is that, certainly Partygate is at least one of the contributing factors as to why, for the first time since December 2019, the government is in somewhat electorally choppy waters and certainly is behind the Labour Party. We can certainly argue that the Labour Party's performance was not particularly dramatic, but the Conservative support was well down on 12 months ago. It's roughly in line with the evidence of the opinion polls that the party has suffered a fair loss of support, and Partygate is at least a part of that story.
All of us in the media, we spend a lot of time talking about the Conservatives and Labour, more time than we spend talking about the Lib Dems. Should we be talking about the Lib Dems now?
Perhaps. The local election performance by Liberal Democrats was the best one that they've achieved since 2010, apart from the local elections of 2019, which took place in the midst of Theresa May's increasingly failing attempt to get her party to agree to the deal with the European Union that she'd negotiated over Brexit. And the Liberal Democrats were attracting voters because of their promise of a second referendum. They don't have those circumstances now, but even so, they did succeed in making a couple of point advance on last year. And two particularly interesting features of it that might perhaps worry Conservative MPs. One is the Liberal Democrat vote was rising just as much in pro-Leave areas as it was in pro-Remain areas, despite the party's past association with the Remain cause. And secondly, the Liberal Democrat vote arose above all in wards where they were starting off in second place to the Conservatives, particularly in the southern half of England, particularly in rural constituencies. In other words, just in very, very much prime Tory territory. So I think certainly what the Liberal Democrats may now be on the cusp of achieving is basically regaining their old role as the principal party of protest, particularly in mid-term. They're still not back to the levels of strength that they had before 2010, but maybe they do now have a platform from which to begin once more to occasionally make waves in the media, and therefore, as a result, perhaps to begin to pick up a measure at least of electoral support.
We're in rife coalition country, aren't we, really, after these elections, or we could be, because under Keir Starmer, Labour haven't progressed anything more than Jeremy Corbyn had brought them, and the Lib Dems are on the rise. So, maybe it's time for a flirtation.
Well, there is no doubt that both the polls and these local elections point to the prospect of a hung parliament. The chances of a hung parliament after the next election are pretty high. And of course, what we also then have to bear in mind is that there aren't any parties in the House of Commons at present who will be willing to help to sustain a minority Conservative administration. So in the event of a hung parliament, it's going to be much easier for Sir Keir to form an administration than it will be for Boris Johnson. But that said, there is potentially a very substantial price and difficult shoals for Labour to negotiate in those situations. The Liberal Democrats, if they can take Labour over the line, they will want progress towards proportional representation. That's a pretty fundamental change to our constitution. But of course, the larger third party at the moment, and perhaps still will be after the next election, is the Scottish National Party. And their price will be some kind of referendum on Scotland's constitutional status in which independence is an option. And that, of course, also has important implications for the future of British politics. So there is no doubt that if Labour can't win an overall majority, but the Conservatives cannot regain their popularity, we may be in for very, very interesting times in the wake of the next general election.
Glasgow, that was Sir John Curtis, the polling expert. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
With the time at 8:15, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And Britain's town centres are to be given a new lease of life, with derelict shop fronts to be transformed. The move is to be announced in the Queen's speech during the state opening of Parliament tomorrow. The Prime Minister says the plans will give councils extra powers to force landlords to rent out empty shops.
The head of Scottish Power says more needs to be done to lower energy bills ahead of winter as prices are set to go up again. Keith Anderson has urged the government to take action, adding that bills are due to rise by almost £1,000 for millions of households by next winter.
The British actor Dennis Waterman has died at the age of 74 and was recognised at last night's BAFTA ceremony. He was best known, of course, for his starring role as bodyguard Terry McCann in Minder, and he first found fame as Detective George Carter in The Sweeney. His family says he passed away peacefully in hospital in Spain with his wife by his side. Now, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will use a speech today to accuse Russia's President Vladimir Putin of mirroring the fascism of the Nazis as the Kremlin holds its annual Victory Day parade.
He also criticised the Russian army for their complicity in war crimes in Ukraine.
Well, for more on this, let's speak now to Olena Sotnik. She's an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Look, here in the UK, yesterday we celebrated VE Day. We understand that the same celebration of defeating the Nazis at the end of the Second World War takes place a day later in Russia. I don't know if perhaps it's even celebrated in Ukraine traditionally as well. But this is going to be entirely different in Russia, being hijacked somewhat by President Putin. I was reading fears that people are wondering whether he might be, in the next few moments, about to use it as an opportunity to declare war and to try and mobilise more resources into this special invasion.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I think we're all waiting for the speech from the different reasons. You're right, from the historical point of view, Russian Federation and also some post-Soviet countries, they celebrate Victory Day today. It is because you need to look to the history that the Act of Surrender for Soviet Union was signed on 9th and to the Europe on 8th of May. It's complicated. We're not going now to the history. In Ukraine, no, according to the decommunization, we are celebrating on 8th of May now. So, but let's come back to 9th of May 2022, which is today in Russia. And you're right, there are several scenarios which is possible and which now been widely disputed along the world. And I would say that there are four main scenarios. First scenario which is fantastic, of course, which possibly Putin could announce that the special war operation finished, that they succeeded, and that DNR, LNR, Donetsk Republic and Lugansk Republic, how they announce them, it's already released, and they just need to finish the last steps to bring them, and maybe even it could be an announcement of annexation. The second scenario is scenario when he can announce partial or national mobilization. He doesn't need to announce war according to the law, according to the Russian law, but there are a lot of expertise, especially military expertise, and I know also that your security services, security services of Great Britain, they've been announced that the lackage of live forces in Ukraine, in Russian war against Ukraine, this is one of the main challenges for Russia. They are losing a lot of people. Our soldiers, they are very professional. Our army is very professional. even though that we are in numbers less and we are smaller than Russian Federation, but we much more efficient and we are fighting for our freedom. That's why, of course, one of the main problems for Putin is to get more people, to get more soldiers.
Yes.
And third scenario, it is declaring of war, official declaring of war. But I can tell you as politician, as a former member of parliament, Russia already started this war in 2014 when they declared annexation of Crimea and when they started invasion in Donbass. So maybe officially he can use it as a propaganda symbol.
Let's talk about that, Elena.
All the world know that it is war. Yes.
Well, let's talk about that. I can bring you the very latest, because whilst you're speaking, you could have seen President Putin at the same time giving his speech live in Moscow. So I'll just bring you the very latest that he's saying. The Russian President Putin speaks at the Victory Parade. He's been congratulating veterans, talking about World War II, but he's also said, "You are fighting for the security of Russia now." He went on to say, "Our duty is to keep the memory of those who defeated Nazism." He says the West was preparing for invasion of our land, that NATO was creating threats at Russia's borders. He said the West did not want to listen to Russia. They had other plans. And of course, all of this highly controversial and quite frankly not based in any fact. He says the special military operation was needed and a timely measure, the only right decision. He says US veterans were banned from attending the parade in Moscow. And he finally has just been saying in the last few seconds that the Donbass volunteers and Russian troops are fighting for their motherland. This will be playing, I'm sure, very well to his home audience, but highly provocative rhetoric coming from the president today.
Yeah, it's provocative, but still, you see, he doesn't have this success which he expected to demonstrate to his people. And the only way how he can proceed, he can continue just to lie and to use the propaganda messages, mainly Nazis messages, which he started since 24th when he had the first speech and when large-scale invasion in Ukraine started. And also it is very important to mention that, he doesn't care mainly about the external audience. He doesn't care about the world. What is happening now, and you can see it from the picture, it is absolutely propaganda style for his internal audience, for Russian people. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to feed them with the messages of glory of Russia and evil of the West countries. That's what he is doing. This is his main instrument. He's just trying to create this threat from abroad.
Elena,
yeah.
Meanwhile, in the UK, our Defence Secretary giving a key speech today, talking about how President Putin and his generals must face the same fate as the Nazis, i.e. the Nuremberg trials for war crimes. And this comes, of course, as we've heard this morning, that 60 civilians were killed in a school by the Russians overnight, in itself amounting to war crimes.
Yes, there are a lot of them. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why I'm afraid Putin is not going to stop. His main reason, not just to destroy Ukrainians, his main reason to destabilize the whole Europe, because for the world now he's just considering as a war criminal. So there is no other way for him just to go to Gag and, of course, to bring justice and to punish him. It should be one of the main goals for the world, because otherwise such behavior would be really like absolutely, permissed. And also one more thing. What is he trying to do? He is trying to create leverage. He is trying to create collapse in Ukraine. He is destroying our critical infrastructure. He is destroying civilians, but also he is destroying all the objects of humanitarian services. So, for example, water supply, electricity supply. Why he is doing this? He is trying to create humanitarian collapse. He is trying to push Ukrainians to move out from the country. He is trying, just to show the whole world that he can collapse the security system of the world. That's why it's very important to stop him as soon as possible, because otherwise I'm sure that if Ukrainians are not going to stop him in Ukraine, he would move further, because his main goal to destabilize the Europe, not just to destabilize the Ukraine. And that's what he is doing now. Look at the prices. Look at the outcomes of the war. Food security. It's already collapsed, and the United Nations announced about this. Humanitarian situation is very difficult. And of course, military support, which has been provided by the Great Britain, it should be provided by all other countries.
Okay. Olena, we have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. We get your message loud and clear, and I interrupt you. Olena Sotnik, thank you, advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, because we are getting these live updates as President Putin is speaking at this very moment. In the last few moments, he is speaking in his address to say that enemies tried to use terrorism against Russia. We are looking out to see whether or not he will be using today's victory parade in Russia to declare war as a means of trying to get a wider mobilisation. Keep a close eye on that live feed for you.
Talking about mobilisation, you would think he's too busy to be involved in anything else. Well, he looks as if he's about to be a daddy again. He turned 70 in October. They say that he's plagued with cancer and Parkinson's disease, yet his lover, who's a former Olympic gymnast, and her name is Alina Kabeva. She's 38 years of age, she's 70, and Alina is dubbed Russia's most flexible woman. So there she is.
Well, that's the age difference of my dad and me. It's interesting, we haven't seen his wife for, a decade or so, and it appears she's been locked up in a convent or something similar. She's been locked away anyway, out of sight. Look, as I said, we're keeping a close eye on what else he's saying. It's really significant coming out of the lips of the President during this victory parade. It's been much anticipated, much feared, and I'll let you know if there are any big developments from there.
Why do you always try and make out you're younger than you are?
What?
She's 38, you're 40.
I'm not 40 yet.
Well, when are you 40?
September.
Yeah, well, that's not 38.
I'm 1 year older than 38. I'm 39. I'm
2 years older.
No, I'm 39. She's 38.
You're 40 in September.
Yeah, but I'm currently 39.
But you claimed there you were 38.
No, I said I'm similar age.
I just people who can't fess up. I mean, there's me, 47.
You know, the last time you were rude about my age, you know how that ended?
Not being rude. Not being rude.
You're making out I'm 40 and I'm 39.
You're not 38.
Help me out here, guys.
It's an issue. It's an issue with you. Last time she swore when I questioned her age. But there we go. Hay fever's what we're talking about next. Now, you've already sneezed today.
I've got Eamonn fever. Yeah,
is that hay fever?
I don't know what it is. I just get cold from the aircon.
Could be aircon, but anyway, Dr. Sarah Kayat, she joins us on her advice on if you're suffering, how you can cope with that right after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Look, a lot of you will be experiencing shortages, whether it's to do with building supplies, whether it's to do with products available in the supermarket, whatever. But now hay fever sufferers may have to wait a bit longer because Britain is experiencing a shortage of, the drugs that you would get in the chemist.
Well, last week we were talking about HRT. This week, as the weather's turning hotter, the pollen count is going up, and lots of you who experience symptoms of hay fever are worrying about how best to protect themselves because, as you're saying, those hay fever tablets are difficult to come by. Let's talk to Dr. Sarah Kyatt now. She joins us in the studio to talk about all of this. It does feel like there's a bit of a sort of crisis of pharmaceuticals at the moment.
It does, I know. As you say, we were here last week just talking about HRT, and it's a worry that manufacturers are not keeping up with the demand. It's a worry that maybe Brexit has a part to play in this. Whatever it is, I think we need to find other ways to manage a lot of our common conditions.
So how can you manage hay fever then if you can't get your hands on, and I believe the technical word is the chlorophenamine maleate, which is the active ingredient in Piriton?
Perfect, yes, you said it wonderfully. So there are other antihistamines out there. So do remember that even if you can't get hold of Piriton, you can get hold of the other ones. Your pharmacist will be able to help you with that. There are also lots of self-help things you can do to manage hay fever. It sounds silly, but putting Vaseline around your nostrils and just on the inside helps trap the pollen so it doesn't go into your respiratory tract.
It can sound as silly as it wants, but if it gives you relief...
Works.
Yeah, it
exactly.
Works.
Sunglasses that are kind of a bit more wraparound to avoid the pollen from going into your eyes.
What about eating locally sourced honey?
So that is something that a lot of people mention, but there's no clinical evidence for it. A lot of people also suggest bee pollen. Now, the problem with bee pollen, it's a concentrated amount of pollen. And whilst the theory behind it might work, it's what they use as immunotherapy in hospitals. They give you small amounts of the thing you're allergic to slowly get your immune system to, combat it. Unfortunately, if you take in a small amount of a very concentrated thing that you could be allergic to, it could end up causing things like anaphylaxis in some people. So I think it's really important that if you're that kind of person that's highly allergic to it, please steer clear.
Don't do that. Okay.
And the thing about hay fever is you're not really sure when it's going to hit. Yes, you have these forecasts and things, but there are different seasons, aren't there?
There are, exactly. There are different seasons. So May is the entrance point for the season for tree and grass pollen, two of the biggest allergens for most people. And that, together with the upcoming hot weather, is going to cause this big influx of hay fever at the moment.
We've got this upcoming hot weather. We've also got a lot of rain in between. How much does rain help to dampen that down? I think we've got 2 hot days, then lots of rain, and then a sort of heat wave next week when it's up to sort of 24, 25. Will the rain help to deal with it?
Yeah, so rain is good. It washes away the pollen from surfaces and things like that, which is actually what you need to do to yourself. So when you enter your house, having been outside, first thing you should do, take off your clothes, put it in the wash and get in the shower, washing your hair and everything to wash off all that pollen.
Clothes off, you in the shower, because it's your hair and things that can carry this around.
And otherwise you're just then bringing it to your bed for night time, and you're just going to be,
your bedclothes on your pillow, whatever. Sarah, can you be immunised? Can you be vaccinated against hay fever?
There is immunotherapy. It needs to be started about 3 months before the hay fever season. So most people start it in December, and they give you very small incremental amounts of the pollen you're allergic to allow your body, your immune system to be able to attack it yourself.
You see, have you ever suffered from it?
I'm very lucky, Sarah, and I don't really know why this is, but I have 4 other brothers, all terribly badly afflicted with them. And so far, I've been as good as gold, and I look at them and I touch wood, and I look at them and I think, you know, why did they all suffer from it and I don't? And they really badly suffer from it. It's miserable.
Yeah, there is a genetic link to hay fever as well. So hay fever comes in with the package of eczema, asthma, and hay fever. They tend to come in a little threesome, and some people are very much affected by it if they have a family history. So you're very lucky.
We should mention our lovely producer Poppy, who's out there suffering. I saw her first thing this morning, and she's normally bubbly and bright and life and soul, and she looked really miserable. And she's saying that she's just, you know, can't get her hands on these hay fever meds. So my heart does go out to people. But that's lots of tips.
I presume you want to go not only just to see your doctor about this, but your pharmacist would offer good advice.
Absolutely. So first port of call, your pharmacist. They're brilliant at managing this. If the medications your pharmacist can't offer you, aren't enough, there are things that can be bought on prescription, and there are referrals that can be made.
Okay. Doctor,
top
thank
tips,
you very much.
as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, we're going to take the break there, and when we come back, we're going to be going through the newspapers in the company of Liz Kershaw and Christopher Biggins. Please stay with us.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So we've got the papers, we've got Liz Kershaw, and we've got Christopher Biggins, and we've covered lots of serious stuff as well. But I want to, Christopher, go to you. And in the Express, front page of the Express, and they are talking about, and they have a picture of, at the BAFTAs last night, Rose, who took part in Strictly Come Dancing. And she won what, Christopher?
She won the must-see moment. And, of course, it was the most must-see moment of this year. And her and Giovanni stopping the music because, of course, she's deaf.
Yes.
And it was absolutely fantastic. And it was well-deserved, that win. I think it was one of the great wins. I also have to say that Sir Billy Connolly won a very important fellowship, and he was very, very moving. Did you see that, Liz, last night? It was fantastic. And the other interesting thing is, It's a Sin, which had something like 8 nominations, didn't win anything, which was the brilliant AIDS TV, which Russell T. Davis produced and wrote. Such a brilliant series. But it didn't win anything, which I was very disappointed with, I have to say.
Biggins, forgive me, have you been on Strictly?
No. I couldn't
That's an
possibly
omission.
do it. I couldn't
That's an
possibly do
omission.
it.
With your knees.
No, and also it's terribly hard, as your wife will tell you.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Oh, I lived through that. But
Yeah, I'm sure you've had to live through it.
Believe me.
No, I love watching it, but no, not for me, I'm afraid.
OK. Is a regional accent for you, viewers and listeners? We go to the Telegraph. This is page 14. Tell us more, Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, on the subject of Strictly, my grandma would say, hey, you couldn't do that, you're right, clodhopper. Which is a word that's not frequently used now, and this is what this survey's about. Now, I've left my glasses out there, but never mind, I've read it, I don't need it. No, it's OK. But my old university, the University of Leeds, did a survey from some, 1938 to 1978 on regional accents and dialect. Accents being the way you pronounce things, of course, and dialect being the actual words that you use. There will be words that are unique to Northern Ireland. And, you could call, what's down your way or whatever your feature is
Yes,
called.
on your doorstep.
On your doorstep. You could call it up your ginnel.
Up your ginnel. That sounds much better.
So I was brought up with the Oldham Tinkers, who were a local group who sing, and that dialect, even then, in the 70s, was alien to me, but they were trying to preserve it. They're still going. By the way, Biggins here confesses he was born in Oldham, would you know?
I was. And my mother hated it so much, we stayed 3 weeks.
Well, you could tell straight away, listening to your accent, it's got Lancashire just pouring out of it.
But when I went to Salisbury, though, that's when after 3 weeks, being 3 weeks old, and of course down there all my family talk like that. So my great auntie Vi loathed it. She hated it. So I had to have elocution lessons. She insisted, and she paid for them. That's why I talk so beautifully now.
Well, at Rochdale Convent, we had elocution lessons, so I can do it. Oh, I wish it would rain. Oh, I do, and I do, but there isn't a cloud in the sky. I can do it. Yeah. But I don't want to. And people say, how can you still talk like that when you've been down there for 35 years? Because it's me.
Yes.
So this survey is saying it's all being eroded, we're all being homogenised. There's this Essex, estuary English, which is spoken in, anywhere in the country. Milton Keynes, Manchester. And they're saying it's sad and they're trying to preserve it. But the serious point is, we were talking about this out there, this article, and a guy out there said, Liz, I'm from the West Country.
Yeah.
He said, why do you never hear a West Country accent on the TV? I said, same reason you don't rarely get a Birmingham one.
A Wolverhampton one.
Yeah, well, you get Adrian Charles from Black Country, he's your token Midlandser. You don't get anybody from Norfolk. You don't get...
Or, worse, you do get people from areas, but they have disguised their accent because they're embarrassed with it. I mean, so in Glasgow and indeed in Belfast, for instance, you get an accent which is totally fabricated, where they say things like, so we'd say, look at that car over there. Whereas they would say, look at those cars.
But do you know how hard that must be to hide your identity in that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
To try and change your accent.
There's plenty of people that do it.
But I mean, it must be all-consuming.
We hear Northern Ireland. The province is absolutely beautiful. They have all the things and the attractions that we have here. I mean, you visit Northern Ireland a lot. There is a wide range of accents.
Oh, huge.
Well, there's a posh Liverpool as well. You got Jodie Comer last night doing a really guttural, great Liverpool accent for a party in Care. But you get posh Liverpool as well. But the serious side of this is, for instance, she said disguising your accent. I wrote to the head of BBC News about 5 years ago and said, why is nobody like me allowed to read the news? You can be a comedian, you can be a DJ now, you can be an entertainer, an actor, but you can't read the news. So they got a Northerner, but he doesn't sound like he's from Bolton.
Yes,
So I just think it's about class. And I think it's still a barrier.
Well,
to have me on here.
I'll tell you, I will always say that here. People talk about racism and sexism and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
The biggest ism that divides this country is class.
But the only acceptable form of classism is upwards. Everyone's allowed to bash anyone in a class above them, but if you bash anyone who's deemed to be below, then you can't do it. I would never dream of making any comments about people's class, but people sure make them the other way.
Well, they do, Isabel, and I didn't want my children to have the same barriers as I did, so I sent them to posh schools.
One of the poshest schools in the country, I hasten to add.
And they're now too posh.
Yeah.
You know, they could now get discriminated against because they're just too posh. Yeah. It's awful, really, isn't it? We've got, you know, rightly so, we've got people going for, you know, sex equality and race equality. But as I said earlier, you know, let's not forget people who...
There is an acceptable level of accent. Yeah. You see people in your local area, if you have a broad accent, and say you are someone like me and you represent, like I know I represent Belfast and Northern Ireland, they wouldn't want me too rough with it. Well, but they don't want you too posh with it either. So there is an acceptable level where...
It's like we were talking outside, the Scottish accent is deemed classless, which is why you get a lot of Scottish people on BBC News programmes.
And adverts.
And adverts for financial products.
Yes, and people from the North East as well.
Yeah, but if you wouldn't get somebody from Govan in Glasgow, a really thick accent.
Yeah.
But it's all got to be... You've not got to be able to discern somebody's background.
Okay.
People have always thought that I must be rough and thick, you know.
But you sure aren't.
Well, I'm taking a bit of time to say that.
You're certainly not thick.
Well, this is by my university, which I went to at 17, Leeds University. So don't judge people by their accent.
No, and I think the variety is just amazing to have here.
The richness of our country.
I think we should go to maybe looking at medical matters. And Christopher, for you, this is the eye, and it's dealing with a specific form of cancer.
It is, and it's pancreatic cancer, which, of course, is a fear of everybody, I think. You know, it's a horrible cancer. And they think that they've developed now a drug which they're trying out on animals and the odd human, and they think it's very successful, and they think this is a great breakthrough if it's true. And because we do need... I know so many people...
So do I.
And it's just awful.
It's very aggressive.
Very aggressive.
Very rapid and painful.
Patrick Swayze was gone in... wasn't he?
I know. And it's just a tragedy. And I do my tests every time I'm supposed to do it, which is not very pleasant, but you do it, and it's good. But, you know, it's not enough. I mean, you know, nowadays you think we might not have any of these terrible diseases, but, of course, they're there and rife.
Indeed.
Now, today I was given a very lovely present by the makeup artist in here today of udder sticks, beef udder, for my dog.
Oh, you offered me one.
Aye.
The pet
I just wanted to say it. Well, I mean, there's other parts.
We didn't think he was going to eat it, did he?
I just wanted to see. Did you? You know, would you go into a seizure or something?
No,
it's all fine.
You didn't open it and offer.
I did
offer one.
I didn't have one at that time of morning.
But they have all these, don't they?
You'd have let poor Elizabeth eat an udder.
But they have biltong and jerky and all that sort of thing.
I didn't. Yeah, but
so that's the
pet food, Em.
Udder sticks.
Right.
That's
utterly ridiculous.
Utterly ridiculous. But that gets me onto bugs, Liz. And this is the Telegraph, page 17.
Well, you know that we've got grain shortages, if we haven't already, oncoming because they're not cultivating the wheat basket of the world or Europe, which is Ukraine at the moment. They've got other things to attend to. And the Russian army is also stealing grains from the storage facilities. So the head of Tesco said, right, well, let's rethink how we feed our livestock to produce human food, Eamonn, not dog sticks. And he said we can cultivate protein by feeding cattle bugs, insects, grubs. And I thought, oh, no, not off horse manure or something. But no, this is all your food waste that you put in your food bags and then you put it in your food bin outside. If all these bugs were let go wild on all this stuff, and then they could shovel up all the maggots and flies and bugs and feed them to the cows, and that would produce protein and that would produce meat.
And it would cut CO2 emissions, would it? Or
they'd still be trumping all over the place.
They could sell them to I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here, too. It'd be perfect.
Yeah. But would you eat that? Would you eat meat if you knew it was... The cattle hadn't been eating lovely grass or grain, they'd been eating...
No, of course not.
No, I wouldn't. No.
We've got some emails on accents I thought we'd just finish on before we move on. This is from Martin. He says, morning, GB team. No one should be judged by their accent. The only reason why newsreaders are selected is because they're English is clear and understandable. And Irene, I'm not going to try and pronounce your surname, Irene, she says newsreading should be accentless. It is simply about being completely understood. I suppose that's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although it is going out of fashion
very
to have
much so.
received pronunciation. Anyway, that's the views of some of our GB News viewers. Let us know what you think this morning. Get in touch the usual way. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Caught this infection now. Or you can tweet us at GB News. But for now, we say goodbye to Liz and goodbye to Christopher Biggins as well.
Thank you, guys.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.
OK, with the time at 8:49, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
The Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, will meet party leaders at Stormont today to press for the return of devolved government. It follows Sinn Féin's historic result in the Assembly elections, which saw them secure 27 seats, and the Unionist Party, the DUP, win 25.
Britain's town centres are to be given a new lease of life, with derelict shop fronts to be transformed. The move is to be announced in the Queen's speech during the state opening of Parliament tomorrow. The Prime Minister says the plans will give councils extra powers to force landlords to rent out empty shops.
Passengers will be greeted by flowers in many stations across the country today for trains in a bid to boost mental health. Network Rail says it hopes they'll lift people's spirits during their journey, as it gives a nod to Mental Health Awareness Week.
In a speech just now, Ukraine's president says around 60 people who'd been hiding from shelling in a school in Luhansk have been killed by Russian bombs. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has called the deliberate targeting of civilians a war crime.
So this morning we hear that the government is proposing a new law which they say will give every child in the country a world-class education and provide a solid foundation. Now, this new bill will attempt to support schools to raise standards, improve attendance and overall safeguarding for children. For more on this, let's speak to the Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donnellan, MP. Good morning to you, Ms Donnellan.
Good morning.
OK. So what are you going to do here? Are you going to educate students now for the workplace specifically, or am I reading that wrongly?
No. What we're trying to do via this bill is ensure that no matter where a child is born, no matter what school they go to in England, they can be guaranteed a fantastic education so that no child falls through the cracks or is let down. And that's key to our levelling up agenda. And we've come a long way. In 2010, 68% of our schools were good or outstanding. Now we have 87%. And obviously we want to squeeze that gap. And as you said, focusing on lifting up standards, focusing on attendance. We know how important it is that children are in our schools. And then also focusing on safeguarding, including those children that are home educated. We'll be introducing a register so we know where they are, and also making sure that local authorities provide more support for those parents that are educating their children at home.
How do you propose to do this, given that we're spending more money in servicing our debt than providing money for our schools? It's not going to be easy to turn many of these struggling state primary, state secondary schools into world-class educational institutions, is it?
Well, firstly, we're also spending more money on our schools. By next year, it goes up by 7% per pupil. And one of the parts of the bill is around lifting standards by encouraging and supporting academisation, which we know is a tried and tested model that can deliver, especially for those struggling schools.
But I get back to this point about educating kids for the workforce. What's the point of educating them if we're not educating them for that life ahead and actually getting them a job? What's the point?
Yeah, so the other thing that we will be announcing in the Queen's speech is around something that I am spearheading called LLE, Lifetime Loan Entitlement, so Lifetime Loan Entitlement. And that will mean from 2024, everybody can log on to an account. They will get access to £37,000 that they can then draw down, which they can spend as they choose. So they'll be in the driving seat throughout their lifetime to upskill and reskill, so that even if they're already in the labour market, they can then go on and get a promotion or get a different job in an alternative sector and really keep their skills up to date. And they don't have to do it via a conventional 3-year degree, which we know is really quite difficult if you've got a mortgage or you've got children and responsibilities. You'll be able to draw down that money and spend it in shorter periods of time, the equivalent to, say, a term, but getting that higher technical education. So really developing a lifetime learning culture in this country, which we have been lacking, but industry has been crying out for. And at the heart of all of our work as a department is making sure that we're co-designing our education with business, especially in further education, apprenticeships, our T-levels, which are our technical qualifications that are on a par with A-levels, so that they are, as you point out, fit for purpose and give people the skills that they need to have in the workplace.
OK, so that's all to come in tomorrow's Queen's speech. Now, you'll be aware we were expecting, ahead of that big moment for Parliament tomorrow, to be hearing from Sir Keir Starmer today. He's pulled out of that speech because he's clearly a bit rattled by all of the allegations swirling and this new investigation being announced by Durham Police into so-called Beergate. I wonder what you think on all of this. Do you think that he should resign, given that he was calling for the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to resign just upon investigation, long before he was even fined, and of course also wanted to see Rishi Sunak going just for being in the same room as an impromptu birthday cake being produced? So do you think that Sir Keir Starmer should stand down, given that he's now being investigated by the police for breaking lockdown rules?
Well, I think really this is a decision for him and not for me to comment on that. What's coming up in my own constituency is a sense of disappointment with the sheer hypocrisy that has happened and come about in terms of Keir Starmer's approach, having known deep down that there was more to this curry evening than initially we thought. You know, it does smack of sheer hypocrisy, and I can understand why my constituents are very concerned about that. But in terms of a potential resignation, that's something that Keir needs to decide, certainly not a decision for me to make or to comment on.
You won't even comment on it. I find that interesting. I mean, given, you know, what happens, for example, if he is found to have broken the rules and he's fined by the police, you still don't have a view?
I don't think we should get into speculation and what ifs and different scenarios. You know, from my point of view and the point of view of the many constituents that have contacted me over the last week, this is smacking of sheer hypocrisy. We saw Keir dominating the agenda over the last few months in terms of making Partygate up there at the top of the agenda, at the exclusion of some really important issues like the rising cost of living and global fight against inflation. And yet we were talking about parties day in and day out. And I'm not saying that people weren't angry about that. Of course they weren't. I'm not saying that that wasn't important to have that discussion. But it is a bit odd that Keir Starmer made that the be-all and end-all throughout the last few months. And yet light is being shone on his own activities and actions. And I think it's been a massive distraction when we really do need to be focusing on, of course, delivering for the people and fulfilling our manifesto, but also, you know, addressing issues like the rising cost of inflation and cost of living and making sure that people are aware of all the support that we're putting in place on that.
But what you really know, Minister, is that Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer are bound together. They're handcuffed together. If Starmer goes, Boris has to go.
Oh, no, I don't accept that at all. I mean, these are very different scenarios. Boris Johnson obviously came forward, apologised, took full responsibility, even for the events that were not, that he wasn't even aware of, that took place when he wasn't even there, when he was in Chequers, one of them. And he introduced fast and swift changes to number 10. We've not seen the same behaviour from Keir Starmer. He's not come forward and apologised. In fact, his answers have been quite muddled as to what actually happened. But this is all a matter for Keir in terms of what he wants to do in the future. And now I want to focus on delivering for the British people, as does my government. We have our Queen's speech this week. We're progressing with more of our manifesto and ensuring that we're delivering on the people's priorities.
Yeah, and look, among those priorities of the British people are the priorities of the people of Northern Ireland. Many people very concerned that perhaps we are seeing the impending collapse of the United Kingdom. Do you think we're about to do away with the protocol?
Well, we know that the protocol isn't working. So our priority is to try and renegotiate the protocol and produce a workable solution so that we can also get the Northern Ireland Executive up and running and functioning for the people of Northern Ireland. We also know that that's what they want. So our focus over the next few days will be on trying to renegotiate that. I know that Brandon Lewis has gone to Northern Ireland today and will be working at pace.
Michelle Donnellan, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time. And Michelle is the Minister for Higher and Further Education, speaking to us live from Wiltshire. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, do stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll have lots more for you, including the West End stars putting on a show to help the people of Ukraine. See you in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Are we a step closer to the breakup of the United Kingdom?
We'll be talking about that shortly. A very good morning to you just after 9 o'clock. It's Monday the 9th of May. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis will meet Stormont leaders today in a bid to restore power sharing, calling it a significant moment for Northern Ireland. He'll also hold talks with the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney to discuss last week's shock results.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has pulled out of a speech amid growing questions about whether he broke COVID rules. The event at the Institute for Government think tank was due to discuss the challenges the country faces.
Vladimir Putin is mirroring the fascism of the Nazis, the Defence Secretary will say today ahead of the Kremlin's annual Victory Day parade. In a major speech, Ben Wallace will also directly criticise Russia's military commanders for their complicity in war crimes.
Well, you can join in any of the discussions, as you have been doing throughout the morning, by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews. So the story leading the news this morning is about Northern Ireland and its place within the Union. The Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, will hold talks today with 5 major parties who will sit, or hope to sit, at the Stormont Assembly.
Well, he conceded that the historic victory, which saw Sinn Féin become the surprise largest party in the Assembly, was a significant moment for Northern Ireland. However, he made clear that his hope was still to form an executive as soon as possible.
Now, he's also expected to meet with the Irish Foreign Minister today, who's warned that restoring the executive in Northern Ireland could actually take months. Let's go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, on this, and he's outside the Northern Ireland office in Belfast. Now, Will, what do we know, first of all, from the Secretary of State? He wants the parties together today. But there's a bit of doubt whether the DUP, the second biggest party, traditionally the biggest party in Northern Ireland, will actually turn up.
Yeah, indeed. So, Eamonn, talks due to begin in the next couple of hours just behind me here in the centre of Belfast. Brandon Lewis due to fly in the next hour or so. The Northern Ireland Secretary, as you say, urging those political parties essentially to try and get the executive back up and running again. Government here in Northern Ireland has not been running for months and months and months. That's because effectively the DUP collapsed it before the election, arguing that they want the British government to sort out this Northern Ireland protocol. That is the part of the Brexit deal that was signed between the UK and the EU back at the end of 2019. And why are the DUP unhappy about it? Well, they argue it splits the UK down the middle. It puts a border in the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland still effectively inside the EU single market and customs union. The DUP argue that is harming Northern Ireland's economy. Now, everyone agrees with that, but that is their position. Clearly the position of most unionists in this country as well, and they're saying they're not prepared to go back into government, Eamonn, until that is sorted. But frankly, the British government trying to sort this for a very, very long period of time. Doesn't seem like the EU's prepared to budge. And the big question is, would the British government be prepared to unilaterally take action to change or to suspend that protocol, even if there are consequences, wider consequences for the EU's relationship with the UK. And that's why it matters to everyone across the UK, but also it really matters here is because lots of people, unsurprisingly, want to see a government back in Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin are now the largest party. They, in theory, will become the First Minister under any new executive. But at the end of the day, as I say, people on this street, people on streets across this province want to get their politicians back in government, making decisions on behalf of them.
What happens next now? A lot of people, Darren, of course, are saying this is the road to United Ireland. How long or short may that road be?
I think it's a pretty long one, if at all, in many ways. Eamonn. You know, clearly Sinn Féin have done very well. They are, for the first time, a nationalist party who have topped the poll in Northern Ireland, a party that wants to see a united Ireland. But that does not necessarily mean there's been a great groundswell of move towards a united Ireland. There are demographic changes in Northern Ireland which probably make it more likely, but the unionist voters held up pretty well. It's just that it's more divided. It's split between three parties, and that's why the DUP have not done particularly well. And frankly as well, Eamonn, when you look at the opinion polls, actually unionist support it's been pretty solid actually for the last 2 decades or so, not significant changes. So I cannot see anything happening. Sinn Féin suggests the next 5 years. I would suggest it's going to be a lot longer than that, not least of all because this is also the reunification of an island. If it were to happen, it is not at all straightforward. In the more short term though, yes, we've got talks now. These talks, and you well know this, can go on for a very long time, weeks, maybe even months. And if nothing happens, and that is also very possible, in the next 6 months, we could be looking again at more elections here in Northern Ireland before the end of the year.
Darren, thank you very much indeed. We want to bring you some breaking news now, and we can dip into the speech being given live by Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, in response to that victory parade that's taking place in Russia today. Let's have a listen into what he has to say.
Liberation from fascism and the Nazi reign of terror. It was a period of immeasurable destruction, atrocities and human suffering, particularly in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, including Ukraine. There will be no mention today in Moscow, however, that much of the suffering was self-inflicted by Stalin and his generals. While in Moscow in February, I accepted the honour of laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier beneath the vast red walls of the Kremlin itself. It stands in memory of those Russians who lost their lives fighting the invading Nazis. As the inscription proclaims, the names are unknown, but their deeds are immortal. As I stood in front of the honour guard, themselves so young with such uncertain fates, even those few weeks later, my thoughts were for the ordinary Russian soldiers, so many of them conscripts who found themselves in a battle for personal and national survival against the Nazi regime. I thought about the scale of the suffering across the Soviet Union, but also how the suffering was used, then as it is now, to cover up the inadequacy of those ruling in safety and comfort from behind the Kremlin walls above and within the general staff nearby. Most Soviet conscripts hadn't a chance. Their suffering was often needless. In the absence of effective military leadership, many of their best officers were purged by the NKVD for counter-revolutionary crimes, while barrier troops executed swathes of retreating soldiers deemed unpatriotic for failing to press on in the face of unassailable odds. Fear and sycophancy dictated behaviours then, and today's Russian armed forces still carry that Soviet imprint, the imprint of immorality and corruption. Let us be honest with ourselves and be open to the inevitable charges of hypocrisy. All armies risk failure of leadership and sliding into depravity, from the dehumanising of enemies and civilians to the reckless discharging of that most solemn power, the power to take another human's life.
So that was the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, listening in there to his speech that he's giving at the National Army Museum here in London, at the same time as those live pictures being beamed around the world of President Putin at that victory parade in Moscow, saying, Ben Wallace was saying that the Russian soldiers' memories are being dishonoured by President Putin.
It is exactly 10 minutes past 9 on this Monday morning. Tonight, London's West End will join together to raise funds for Ukraine. It's all taking place at the Cambridge Theatre, and one of those performers is former Strictly Professional dancer Joanne Clifton, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning, how are you?
We're fine. So if we're looking for a late night tonight, what's planned?
Well, at 7:30 at the Charing Cross Theatre tonight, loads of West End performers, like big West End performers, are getting together, and we're hoping to raise at least £10,000 for the Ukraine.
Fantastic. It's so amazing to see people from all walks of life coming together and using their skills to try and raise money. We saw, didn't we, Bono in Kyiv yesterday performing in a subway, and here in the West End doing our part as well.
Absolutely. I think everyone has got to do something. I mean, we've all seen the horrific images on the news and everything, so we need to get out there and do anything we can. And for us performers, I mean, we've had it tough ourselves over the last 2 years with COVID, and with, you know, the government not helping us too much and even being told to retrain. So actually an event like this is great for us to get up and perform, but to be doing something really good at the same time. And
What you're going to be performing, because I was watching a documentary on Fred Astaire over the weekend, and I'm thinking, oh, there's a man, or if there's someone who I presume you would have loved to have danced with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, actually, I'm dancing with a guy called Joshua Lay tonight. I'm dancing and singing. We're doing a duet to I Won't Dance. And I actually danced with and performed with Josh Lay in Top Hat, the musical, in 2017, which was Fred and Ginger. So it's kind of similar tonight.
That, yeah.
I want to ask your opinion, of course, it's the BAFTAs last night. Lots of people will know, of course, you are from a performing background. Your brother, one of the stars of Strictly, Kevin Clifton. What did you make of Giovanni and Rose winning the best moment for that silent dance?
Thoroughly deserved. Oh my gosh, I thought that was an absolutely, oh my gosh, it was thoroughly deserved. They just changed the world of BSL, for deaf people. They just changed it in that moment there, and now it's been BSL has been accepted as a language, and it's just done wonders for the deaf people.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll do wonders for some people at least, no matter how few, in Ukraine. It must be just good that you feel there is something that you can do. We all feel quite powerless, and there you are, you say, look, it mightn't be much, but this is what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to thank Kieran Brown, who organised this event, and all the West End. There's massive stars there tonight, taking time, even if they're in a show, they've taken time to come and perform and sing and dance, and hopefully we'll get the £10,000.
OK, do you need bums on seats?
Yes.
OK, so let people know where you are and what time's it all happening at.
So it's at 7:30, Charing Cross Theatre tonight. I think there's about 21 seats left, so get your tickets.
Although I reckon there won't be many bums on seats. I reckon people will be up and dancing as they watch it. Look, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Good luck tonight, and great to hear you're doing something for Ukraine as well. Joanne Clifton, dancer and singer in that performance tonight at Charing Cross Theatre. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's one bit of showbiz to talk to there. Isabel alluded to the BAFTAs last night, and we're going to be talking about those with Ellie Phillips right after this break.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens. Moving into northern England, and it will also be dry there, but the cloud will be in on the increase, especially in the west. Winds will also be strengthening here, especially over the Pennines. Up into Scotland, and it's a very different story here, with a band of wet and windy weather moving across the country. Feeling much cooler here too, much more than yesterday. The wet weather will also be affecting Northern Ireland this lunchtime, with the raining turning heavy at times. Combined with strengthening winds, it will also be feeling pretty miserable here. The rain will be slowly tracking back south-eastwards throughout the rest of Monday, although much of the south is staying dry until after dark. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
OK, with the time at 9:17, we're going to go through all the showbiz news, and what a lot there is to talk about today. Ellie Phillips, I mean, don't really know where to start. You choose.
I want to start with BAFTAs. I'm not going to lie, it was last night, it was incredible, it was so much fun, and it was a big night for Scousers, so I'm obviously going to love it, do you know what I mean? Kathy Hyson, she won Supporting Actress for her role in Help. Jodie Comer, she won Best Actress for Help, so that was incredible. And Stephen Graham, he didn't win for his role in Time, but Time won, so he got up on stage and he said a few words. So we're taking that as a Scouse win.
OK, lots of wins and love for the Scousers. And actually, Jodie Comer, she always surprises you when she comes out with a really thick Scouse accent, because you rarely see it in her performances, which I think makes her another layer of talented, don't you think?
Yeah, she is so multi-talented. Her accents are phenomenal. She's there on the red carpet. She looks incredible. She wore an Elizabeth Saltzman outfit, really sleek, looked sensational. And she came out, and it's always really sweet because she comes on stage and she's like, I'm so nervous. And you can't, it's really hard to believe that when you see how confident
do you not believe that, Eamonn?
Look, they're all actors and actresses.
No, I think she's quite girl next door.
It's like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. When you sit and you look at that court case, I mean, all I think is, yes, I believe her. Yes, I believe him. who do you are supposed to believe? They're actors. They're actors.
It's tough when they're that talented.
I love how naive you are about the world.
Well, I just assume, because people always think of me, oh, it's all an act and all that. I get nervous, and I'm quite a shy person, but people think
you're not an actor.
No, but people get the wrong impression, so I always try to believe the best in people.
Yeah,
That's
that's a noble sentiment, that is, absolutely. Just actually get have a word about Dennis Waterman before we do this. So he died yesterday after an illness, and, you know, from the Sweeney, from Minder, from, what's the other one called?
Nutrix.
Nutrix, yeah. Hard to survive in the acting world, but he seemed to do it well.
Yeah, he did it well. So he was massive in the 70s and 80s, and it was announced yesterday by his wife and the family that he died in Spain with wife Pam by his side. He was 74 years old, and he leaves behind 2 daughters, Julia and Hannah. Hannah's actually quite well known. She played Laura Beale in EastEnders, so acting dynasty family, which is there. And yeah, he was actually caricatured as well by David Walliams in Little Britain. So, you know, his legacy goes on through that as well.
Is that right?
Yeah, which is amazing, isn't it? Like, I think that really puts you, status is up there with it. They announced before the in memorandum that he had passed away, so they announced it at the ceremony, and he wasn't included in the in memorandum because it was such a last minute announcement from the family.
Yes.
And it was really beautifully put together, the in memorandum. You had Janice Long, June Brown, Sean Locke, and the list of talent that we've lost this year.
Ellie, he's described as a man who lived life to the full, which Eamonn and I have decided is code word for got married lots of times.
He did. Yeah, he had 4 wives, which, I mean, fair play. Happy stints as well, each of them. And he has 2 children out of it. So I think, had a great life.
Yeah. Okay, well. New Doctor Who?
Yes, this is so exciting. Again, announced just as the red carpet was opening last night at the BAFTAs. So Nkuti Gatwa is going to be the 14th Time Lord. Now, he's best known for his role in Sex Education. He starred as Eric. It was hugely popular. He was there on the red carpet last night looking sensational in this cut-out, chest-bearing outfit that he wore, which was incredible. He's a Rwandan Scottish actor, and he actually revealed last night that he's known since February that he bagged the role, and he's had to keep it a secret. And he said, again, he's really nervous about it, but we never know. And yeah, he's come from a really complicated background. He moved to Scotland as a toddler. His family fled the Rwandan genocide, and at one point he was homeless. So this is an incredible success story for him. And he's the first openly queer actor to take on the role as the Time Lord.
Wow, OK, interesting. It's breaking lots of barriers down there. And we're talking about the BAFTAs again because obviously it was, the awards given out last night. Billy Connolly getting the Lifetime Achievement. Of course, he suffers from Parkinson's, doesn't he? And just what is there to say other than what a legend?
He was amazing. So he sent a video acceptance in of him at home accepting the award, and it was just amazing to see. He owned it. He said, you might notice that my left arm is a bit different to my right arm. That's Parkinson's disease. It's one of those things. And then he said, my wife, she gets to dress me in the morning and she gets to take my clothes off in the evening. It's a jolly good life. He really was amazing to see, and he has this really great breath of fresh air about him when you watch him. So, yeah, he said he's very, very happy and he couldn't ask for more.
Yeah. So who were the winners and losers at BAFTA last night? There was a lot of love, if we could call it that, or lobbying for Channel 4.
Yeah, Channel 4 did really, really well. So it won a lot of awards. So Gogglebox, latest show, Stratlett's Flats, they did really well for Channel 4. And what happened was a lot of people who came up on stage to accept their awards, they were saying, this is a public broadcaster, let's not let it go. It's really important that we have this. They've championed things that they might not have been championed elsewhere. And there was also a lot of love for the BBC as well. They said, come on, let's keep our broadcasters there. Let's not tear them apart. So that was really good to see as well. In terms of losers, the big one was It's a Sin. They were nominated for 11 awards. They were going to, take over, and they won none. So
sometimes that often happens if you've got so many nominations. I don't know who decides the categories. They always just assume they're going to win in the next, and sometimes they end up with nothing.
Yeah.
But that's a real shame. And Sex Education had 4 nominations as well, and they got nothing as well.
They didn't get anything either. Also, Landscapers and Lady Parts. And the one for me that I was quite surprised about was Casualty. So Casualty was up for an award, and it went to Coronation Street. Again, great, but Casualty's just been axed, so I think it would have been nice for them to have gotten that nod as a farewell to the show, and they didn't. I think that was quite disappointing.
Well, that is a shame.
Yeah.
Bad jokes?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it was so Michelle Keegan came on stage and she was with Tom Daley and he's got this crazy suit on. It's so flamboyant, it's amazing. And she's like, oh, I thought you were going to wear knit because he's famous for knitting, you know. And she was like, what's that about? And they tried to do a joke about him knitting her underwear, her having underwear on that he'd knitted and he'd teach her to knit. And it was so flat.
Cringe.
The whole audience was like, oh, this just has not landed well at all.
Well, it's about the only thing that Michelle has been involved in that's gone flat, because, you know, everything she touches turns to gold. Very good in Brassic on Sky.
Amazing. And honestly, everything she turns up to, she looks $1 million.
She's just stunning.
Last night she wore this dress by Zahir Murad and she glided onto the stage. She actually glided and it was like, how are you human?
Yeah.
How is this possible?
You know,
I'm talented.
Roll back a week and we were talking about the Met Gala, weren't we? And honestly, for me, the outfits last night were so much nicer than at the Met.
Because they were more real,
maybe,
more
but
I'm
not. I just find the Met a bit much. But
the Met.
Yeah, Rose, who obviously won this must-see moment for Strictly. I loved her black dress. It was so simple. I love Michelle Keegan's dress. I love what Jodie Comer was wearing. There were so many things that I thought, oh, I could wear that. But everything at the Met, I was like, what?
Well, this is the thing, I think, with the BAFTAs. There was a real sleek look to all the outfits last night, but it is a classic red carpet, whereas the Met Gala is for costume.
Yeah.
It's a costume gala. Aisling B looked phenomenal in this blue dress. There were some real colour pops that came out on the red carpet. She was one of them. There were a lot of fuchsia pinks actually there as well, but I think Olivia Colman there, she looked phenomenal in all black. She had an Alexander McQueen tux on. She looked sensational and her hair just added to the whole movement. This is Big Zoo. Now, he was a massive winner last night, this guy in the middle, and he won 2 awards and it was completely unexpected, if I'm honest. The programme that he has, Big Zoo's Big Eats on Dave, he's like a comedian that does cooking as well, and he stole the show all night.
Really?
He really stole the show. He was amazing, and he only turned up in a hoodie, but he went on stage and he was so grateful, and he said, you know, this is for the working class people, you can do it. I didn't see people like me on TV. Get out there, get involved, and big thanks to Dave, because he won 2. Yeah. He said, I did it for Dave.
If this was America, the host would have a lot of concentration on how the host actually did. How did he do?
I think he was really good. So he's hosted it before, didn't go too well. But
Who was hosting?
Richard Ayoade. So he did it previously and it didn't really go well. It went really well last night. He was quick-witted. He responded to things really quickly. He went a few, jibes. He obviously noted the Oscar-gate slap, and he said, 75 years ago, you didn't have time to get up on stage and get back down. The show would have been over, so no slaps tonight. So, yeah, really, really good.
Well, this show's over too, Ellie. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution this morning. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah.
Lovely having you on board, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube, on telly, around the world, wherever you are. It's been a privilege to have you. We'll see you again in the morning when we'll do it all again.
Yeah, and up next, it's Tom Harwood with The Briefing. See you tomorrow.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and bright for England and Wales, but sadly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at the details. After a bright start this morning, cloud will begin to increase around lunchtime across the southwest. It will be dry though, with temperatures climbing into those high teens. Moving east, and they'll be hanging on to the sunshine across the southeast and East Anglia. It'll be feeling warm with just a small light breeze crossing the ground. Across into Wales and western parts, we'll see the winds increasingly freshen. There will still be some sunny spells on offer, particularly across the eastern areas. The Midlands will see sunny skies turn increasingly hazy as we move into the afternoon. Despite the increase in cloud, it will remain dry, with temperatures climbing into the high teens.